If you don't subscribe to the channel, all the stories will happen to you. Get ready for the nightmare. The phone rang just past midnight, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of Sam's dimly lit apartment. He lay on his couch, halfway through a rerun of an old sitcom, the comforting noise of the television barely registering as his mind wandered. It was one of those nights when sleep felt impossible, and the ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual. With a sigh, Sam reached for the phone, expecting to see an unknown number or a late-night spam call. Instead, his blood turned cold. The name on the screen read Tom. Tom, his best friend, who had died exactly a year ago. Sam froze, the phone still vibrating in his hand. He stared at the name on the screen, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a cruel prank, or maybe his phone was malfunctioning. There was no way Tom could be calling him. He let the call go to voicemail, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, Sam considered turning his phone off, shutting out whatever this was, but curiosity gnawed at him. What if there was an explanation? Maybe someone else had Tom's old number. The phone vibrated again. Tom. Sam hesitated, his thumb hovering over the answer button. Finally, he swiped right and pressed the phone to his ear. Hello. There was nothing but static on the other end at first, a low crackle that made his skin crawl. Then, faintly, he heard Tom's voice. Sam? The sound of his friend's voice sent a shiver down Sam's spine. He hadn't heard it in over a year, and yet it was unmistakable. It was Tom. His tone, the slight drawl that always made him sound perpetually relaxed, even in the most serious situations. Tom, Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. His throat felt tight, his heart racing. Is that really you? More static crackled through the phone, followed by a long silence. Sam held his breath, straining to hear anything more. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't possible. Tom was dead gone. Sam had been at the funeral, had seen the casket lowered into the ground. The voice returned, softer this time, almost drowned out by the static. I need your help. Sam's hands trembled as he gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? How are you calling me? Another long pause. Then, find me, Sam. Find me before it's too late. The line went dead. Sam sat there, the phone still pressed against his ear, his mind reeling. The room felt colder, the shadows on the walls darker than before. He stared at the screen, which now showed the call ended. His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt a sinking dread settle in his gut. What had just happened? It couldn't have been real. Tom was gone. He knew that. But the voice on the other end of the line had sounded so much like him, so real. Sam felt his head spinning, confusion and fear colliding within him. For a long while, Sam didn't move. He sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, trying to convince himself it was just a dream, a product of his sleeplessness and grief. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The voice had been too clear, too familiar to ignore. Sam grabbed his jacket and his keys, ignoring the late hour. He needed to clear his head, to get away from the suffocating silence of the apartment. The city streets were quiet, the occasional car passing by as Sam walked aimlessly, trying to shake the unease that clung to him. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to Tom. They'd been friends since childhood, inseparable for most of their lives. They'd shared everything, secrets, dreams, fears. And yet, in the last year of Tom's life, they had drifted apart. Tom had become distant, withdrawn. Sam had tried to reach out, but Tom always seemed to have some excuse, some reason to avoid meeting up. Then, one night, Sam had received a call that changed everything. Tom was dead, an accident, they said, a fall from the roof of his apartment building. No one knew why he had been up there or what had caused the fall. It had been ruled a tragic accident, but Sam had never believed that. Something about it had never felt right. Now, as he wandered the dark streets, Sam's mind churned with questions. What if Tom's death hadn't been an accident? What if there was something more, something that had been left unresolved? And what had Tom meant by asking for help? The wind picked up, chilling Sam to the bone. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, his mind racing with possibilities. He thought about the last time he had seen Tom alive, about the strange things his friend had said during their final conversation. Tom had been paranoid, talking about someone watching him, following him. At the time, Sam had dismissed it as stress or exhaustion, but now he wasn't so sure. As Sam turned a corner, his phone buzzed again in his pocket. He pulled it out, half expecting to see Tom's name on the screen once more. Instead, it was a message. No sender, just a single sentence. Find the truth before it finds you. Sam's pulse quickened as he stared at the message, dread coiling in the pit of his stomach. His fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to respond, but there was no number to reply to. The message had come from nowhere, just like Tom's call. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle swirling in his thoughts, but nothing made sense. Why was this happening now? Why had Tom reached out from beyond the grave, asking for help? And what truth was he supposed to find? As Sam stood there on the empty street, illuminated only by the dim glow of a distant street lamp, he felt the weight of something dark and dangerous closing in around him. The quiet of the night seemed to press in from all sides, and for the first time in years, Sam felt truly alone. Whatever had happened to Tom, it wasn't over. Not yet. Sam couldn't sleep after that night. The mysterious phone call, followed by the cryptic text message, had lodged itself into his brain like a splinter. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tom's face, heard his voice, pleading for help. The message repeated in his head, "Find the truth before it finds you." But what truth? What was he supposed to be looking for? He had no idea where to start, yet something inside him urged him to keep digging. Tom had reached out to him for a reason, and Sam couldn't let it go. The next morning, Sam decided to revisit Tom's apartment, the last place anyone had seen him alive. It had been a year since Tom's death, and the building had new tenants by now, but maybe there was something still there. A clue, a sign, anything. He stood outside the old brick building, staring up at the rooftop where Tom had fallen to his death. It seemed so surreal, like a distant memory that didn't belong to him. Yet here he was, trying to make sense of it all, hoping to find answers in the shadows of the past. As Sam climbed the steps to Tom's former apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His skin prickled with unease, though he saw no one around. The air in the stairwell was heavy, almost suffocating, and each step echoed in the silence. When he reached the door of Tom's old unit, he stood there for a moment, hesitating. The door had a new nameplate, Johnson. Sam wondered if the new tenants would even let him in, but he knocked anyway, determined to find out if there was anything left of Tom's life here. A middle-aged woman answered, looking puzzled as she opened the door. "Can I help you?" Sam cleared his throat, suddenly feeling awkward. "Hi. Sorry to bother you. I used to be a friend of the guy who lived here before you, Tom. I was wondering if maybe, I don't know, if there was anything left behind? Anything strange?" The woman frowned, her brows knitting together. "Strange? No, not really. We've been here for almost a year. The place was pretty much cleared out when we moved in." Sam nodded, disappointed but not surprised. "Right? Thanks, anyway." As he turned to leave, the woman paused. "Wait, there was something odd, now that I think about it." Sam's heart skipped a beat. "What?" She gestured for him to follow her inside. The apartment looked completely different from how he remembered it. New furniture, new decor, but the bones of the place were the same. She led him to a small hallway closet, one Sam hadn't paid much attention to during his visits to Tom's apartment. "When we first moved in, we found a box in here. I figured it was something the old tenant left behind. It was taped up, though, so I never opened it." She pulled the box from the top shelf of the closet, dusting it off as she handed it to Sam. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox, and sealed tightly with old packing tape. Sam felt a strange sense of anticipation as he took it from her hands, as if the answers he sought were somehow inside. "I'll leave you to it," she said, backing away slightly. "If you need anything, just let me know." Sam thanked her and left the apartment as quickly as he could. The box felt heavier in his hands than it should have, the weight of it almost symbolic of the secrets it might contain. He hurried back to his own apartment, his mind racing with possibilities. When he got home, Sam sat at his kitchen table, staring at the box for what felt like hours. His hands shook as he peeled away the tape, his breath shallow and quick. What was inside? Would it give him the answers he needed? Or would it only deepen the mystery? Finally, he opened it. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them, all of Tom. Some were familiar, snapshots of their group of friends from years past, laughing at parties or hanging out at the beach. but others were different. Sam's brow furrowed as he flipped through the pictures. The more recent ones showed Tom looking tense, almost paranoid. He wasn't smiling like he used to. In some of the photos, Tom was looking over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to be there. And in several of them, there was a shadow, an indistinct shape, hovering in the background. It didn't look like a person, but something darker, formless. A chill ran down Sam's spine. Who had taken these photos? Why did Tom have them? And more importantly, why hadn't he shown them to Sam before? There was one more item in the box, an envelope, sealed and addressed to Sam. His name was scrawled in Tom's handwriting, the ink slightly smudged as if it had been written in a hurry. Sam's heart raced as he tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was short, but it sent a wave of fear crashing over him. Sam, if you're reading this, it means something's gone wrong. I don't know who to trust anymore, but I know they're coming for me. Please, whatever you do, don't follow the shadow. If you see it run, trust no one. The letter ended abruptly, as if Tom hadn't had time to finish it. Sam stared at the words, his mind reeling. The shadow. Was that what Tom had been seeing in the photos? Was it the thing that had been following him in his final days? And what did Tom mean by they? Who were they? Before Sam could process everything, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, half expecting another cryptic message or an unknown number. But it wasn't. It was another call from Tom. Sam's hand trembled as he answered the phone, his voice barely a whisper. Tom! This time, there was no static, no distortion. Just Tom's voice, clear and unmistakable. You shouldn't have opened the box, Sam. Sam's blood ran cold. Tom, what's going on? Who's after you? They know you're looking, Tom said, his voice calm but urgent. They won't stop now. Sam's throat tightened. Who are they? What do they want? Tom's voice softened. It doesn't matter now. They're coming for you too. The line went dead. Sam sat there in stunned silence, his heart racing. Whoever, or whatever, had taken Tom was now coming for him. Sam's apartment felt colder than usual as the silence that followed Tom's warning enveloped him. The weight of the box's contents, the eerie photographs, and the cryptic letter clung to him like an invisible fog. He stared at his phone, willing it to ring again, but the screen remained blank. He couldn't just sit here. The idea of them coming for him felt abstract, like something out of a bad dream. But the sense of urgency in Tom's voice couldn't be ignored. He needed answers, and fast. The first logical step was to find out more about the shadow. Sam hadn't seen anything unusual himself, but the photos told a different story. The figure in the background of those images wasn't just a trick of the light. It was deliberate. Something or someone had been watching Tom. Maybe it had been following him for longer than Sam realized. Sam pulled the box of photos closer, determined to study each one more carefully. There had to be a pattern, a clue hidden in the details. He spread the photos across the table, arranging them chronologically as best he could. The early ones were innocent enough, filled with happy memories of their college days. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. The first photo with the shadow was from about 6 months before Tom's death. It wasn't obvious at first, a faint blur in the corner, barely noticeable. But as the photos progressed, the shadow became clearer, more defined. It seemed to grow closer to Tom with each passing week, until in the last few, it was right behind him, looming over his shoulder like a specter waiting to strike. Sam's stomach churned as he reached the final photo. Tom stood in front of his apartment building, his face pale and gaunt, the shadow now unmistakable, dark, swirling, and almost humanoid in shape. And then something caught Sam's eye. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. In this last photo, there were 2 glowing eyes, deep within the darkness, staring directly at the camera. Staring directly at him. A wave of nausea hit him, and he shoved the photo away, his hands shaking. What had Tom gotten himself into? And more importantly, how had it followed him from the grave? Sam's thoughts raced. He needed help, but who could he trust? The police would never believe him. Telling anyone about a shadow with glowing eyes would only make him sound crazy. He couldn't go down that route. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his panic. It wasn't a call this time, just a message. Do not leave the apartment. Sam's breath hitched. It was from Tom's number again, and the words sent a chill down his spine. He had no idea if it was really Tom or something else using his friend's identity, but he didn't care. Instinct screamed at him to get out, to run as far away as possible. But if the message was true, staying inside was his only chance. The moments ticked by in agonizing silence. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car honk from the street outside made him jump. His mind was on high alert, scanning the room for any sign of movement or intrusion. Paranoia was sinking in, deep and relentless. Sam glanced at the door, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. The photographs, the phone calls, they all pointed to something out there. But what? And how much danger was he really in? His thoughts spiraled. What if the shadow wasn't just a figment of the imagination or an illusion caught in a photo? What if it was real? Something that could cross the boundary between life and death. Sam thought back to Tom's letter, to the warning he hadn't taken seriously at first. Don't follow the shadow. If you see it, run. What if this thing, this shadow, was more than a mere threat? What if it was capable of far worse than just watching? The idea that it could be coming for him, the same way it had claimed Tom, filled him with dread. And then, out of the corner of his eye, Sam saw it. A dark shape, faint but unmistakable, moving at the edge of his vision. His blood turned to ice as his gaze snapped toward the spot where the shadow had been. But it was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. For a second, Sam thought he had imagined it, a trick of his frayed nerves. But then the temperature in the room plummeted. The air around him thickened, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. His breath came out in shallow, foggy puffs as he scanned the room, heart pounding in his ears. He stood slowly, inching toward the front door. Every instinct screamed at him to get out, to ignore the text, and flee before whatever was lurking in the shadows made its move. But something stopped him. The air was thick with a presence, invisible, yet palpable, like a predator waiting for him to slip up. And then, as he reached for the doorknob, a voice whispered through the cold silence. "Sam." He froze. It wasn't Tom's voice this time. It was deeper, more guttural, like something ancient and hungry. Sam's hand hovered over the door, every muscle tense with fear. The voice came again, closer now, almost at his ear. "You can't run." His hand jerked back from the doorknob. Whatever this thing was, it was already inside. Running wasn't an option anymore. His mind raced, desperate for a plan. He grabbed his phone, scrolling through his contacts. Who could he call? Who would believe him? There had to be someone who could help him figure out what was happening. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Tom's number. "They're already here." Sam's eyes widened, his pulse skyrocketing. The weight of those words settled in his chest like a stone. The shadow wasn't just following him. It was here in his apartment, watching him. He needed to move, to do something, but his body was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then everything went dark. The apartment was plunged into an oppressive, suffocating blackness. Sam's heart pounded in the silence, the darkness pressing in from all sides. He fumbled for his phone, the small screen his only source of light now. But before he could even unlock it, the temperature dropped further, and he felt it, the unmistakable presence of something standing right behind him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as a low, guttural growl echoed through the room. Sam's breath hitched, his mind screaming at him to turn around, to face whatever was there, but he couldn't. He couldn't bring himself to look. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the presence was gone. The air shifted, the oppressive weight lifted, and the lights flickered back on. Sam was alone again, standing in the middle of his apartment, trembling with fear. But he knew, deep down, that this was far from over. Whatever had claimed Tom's life was now coming for his. Sam stood frozen, his mind racing as his thoughts tried to catch up to what had just happened. The cold presence had vanished, but the memory of it lingered, pressing heavily on his chest. The silence in the apartment was overwhelming, almost suffocating, but his instincts told him not to let his guard down. He couldn't stay here. Whatever was haunting him had already made its way inside. Ignoring Tom's warning felt like a death sentence now. His body finally moved, slow and stiff, as though still under the weight of the shadow's presence. Grabbing his phone, he stuffed it into his jacket pocket and made his way to the door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. Was it safe to leave, or was he just walking into something worse? Sam glanced over his shoulder at the photos still spread across his table. The shadow in those images had started small, but it had grown bolder closer. Now, it had crossed the threshold from a mere figure in a picture to something tangible, something that could manifest in his world. He couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just watching him anymore. It was hunting him. He yanked open the door, stepping into the dimly lit hallway of his apartment building. The faint hum of the overhead lights barely penetrated the eerie silence. He made his way down the corridor, trying to ignore the gnawing sensation that something might be following him. The elevator seemed impossibly far, but Sam forced his legs to move faster, his heart thudding in his ears. He reached the end of the hall and jabbed the elevator button repeatedly, willing the doors to open. Every second felt like an eternity. A soft ding finally broke the silence as the elevator doors slid open. Sam stepped inside, breathing a small sigh of relief as they closed behind him. The descent to the ground floor was agonizingly slow, the soft hum of the machinery barely masking his racing thoughts. Tom had warned him about them, whoever or whatever they were, and now Sam was in the crosshairs. He had to figure out what was happening, how to stop it before it was too late. The elevator jerked to a halt, and the doors opened with a low groan. Sam stepped out into the lobby, the sterile white walls and flickering fluorescent lights doing little to calm his nerves. He crossed the space quickly, heading for the glass doors that led out to the street. The night air hit him like a slap, the cool breeze calming his nerves slightly. He needed to think, to gather his thoughts and figure out his next move. But where could he go? Who could he trust with something like this? His phone buzzed again in his pocket, and he pulled it out with trembling fingers. Stay out of the light. The message was from Tom's number, and Sam's stomach twisted in knots. His eyes darted around, scanning the street for any sign of danger. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and every dark corner felt like it could be hiding something malevolent. What did the message mean? Stay out of the light? Sam's mind raced, trying to make sense of the cryptic warning. The shadow that had been following Tom, it thrived in darkness, didn't it? Why would he need to avoid the light? His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a call. Tom's number flashed on the screen. Sam's hand shook as he answered. Tom? What's happening? There was silence on the other end, but not the kind of silence you'd expect from a dead call. It was deeper, darker, almost as if something was breathing softly into the void. Sam. The voice was barely a whisper, distant and strained, like someone calling from the depths of a nightmare. You need to listen. Sam's throat tightened. What are they? What do they want? The voice crackled, cutting in and out. They feed on fear, on those who follow, too closely. Sam's mind raced. Why me? I haven't done anything. You're already marked. The voice was fading, the static growing louder. It started with me. Now you're next. Next for what? Sam's voice rose, panic edging in. Tom, what do they want? The static crackled, louder now. Don't follow the light. The words were barely audible now, lost in the rising noise. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. What do you mean? Tom. The line went dead. Sam stared at his phone, dread sinking in. Don't follow the light. What the hell did that mean? The warning made no sense, yet it carried the same urgency as Tom's earlier messages. A cold wind blew down the empty street, and Sam shivered. He couldn't stay here, standing like a sitting duck. He needed answers, but more importantly, he needed to get out of sight, away from whatever was stalking him. The streets were deserted, the night eerily quiet. Sam's apartment was no longer safe, and heading back felt like a trap. There was only one other place he could think of, Tom's old apartment. Maybe there, buried in whatever secrets Tom had kept hidden, he'd find the answers he needed. Without another thought, Sam turned on his heel and started walking, the city's empty streets stretching out before him. Every step felt heavier, the weight of the unseen threat pressing down on him. He could feel it, something watching, lurking just beyond the edges of his vision. Sam walked briskly through the streets, his breath fogging in the chilly night air. The city, usually alive with activity even in the late hours, felt strangely abandoned. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the corners of his vision, making his heart race, but he pushed the rising panic down. Tom's apartment was only a few blocks away. He just had to make it there. The warning echoed in his mind. Don't follow the light. It didn't make sense. Normally, light was safety, a ward against whatever lurked in the dark. But Tom's message had turned that idea on its head. If the light wasn't safe, then what could he trust? He walked faster, instinctively glancing up at the street lights overhead, their harsh glow flickering as if something was disturbing the electricity. As he neared Tom's building, Sam noticed the block was bathed in an eerie glow from a large, blinking street lamp near the entrance. The light flickered erratically, casting strange, distorted shadows on the ground. His pulse quickened. This didn't feel right. Standing in front of Tom's apartment door, Sam hesitated. The key was still on his keychain, an old remnant from when they had been closer friends. It slid easily into the lock, and the door creaked open. The air inside was thick, heavy with dust and neglect. Tom had been gone for months, and it was clear no one had been inside since. The apartment was a mess, papers strewn across the floor, furniture pushed haphazardly against the walls. It felt wrong, as though something violent had happened here, even though there were no signs of an actual struggle. Sam stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The quiet was oppressive, the kind that made you feel like you were being watched. He could almost hear his heartbeat echoing in the stillness. His eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that could provide answers, something that could explain the strange messages, the warnings, and the shadow that had invaded his life. On a small table near the kitchen, he spotted something odd. Tom's phone. It was dusty, the screen dark and lifeless, but it was there, right where Tom had left it. Sam picked it up, but it wouldn't turn on. The battery was completely drained. If Tom's phone had been here all this time, how had he been sending messages? How had he called? The chill that had settled in Sam's bones deepened. He walked further into the apartment, stopping near the window. There, pinned to the wall, was a collection of photographs. Some were of landscapes, others of people, but there was one common theme: shadows. Every single image had some kind of shadowy figure, just like the one that had appeared in Sam's own photographs. In one picture, a shadow loomed over a person standing in a brightly lit room, its form indistinct but undeniably menacing. As he studied the photos, something shifted in the corner of his vision. A shadow, but not like the ones in the images. This one moved, slinking across the floor toward him. Sam's breath hitched as he stepped back, his body instinctively trying to retreat. The light from the flickering street lamp outside poured through the window, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. And then he saw it. Something standing just outside the window, bathed in that erratic glow. It wasn't human, or at least, not anymore. The figure was tall, its shape flickering and twisting as if it couldn't quite hold onto reality. Its eyes, if they were eyes, seemed to glow faintly, locked onto him. Suddenly, the light outside went out. The street lamp blinked off, plunging the room into complete darkness. Sam's heart raced as he backed away from the window, trying to stay calm. But the air felt thick with the presence of something else, something sinister. His phone buzzed in his pocket again. The sound made him jump, his fingers fumbling as he pulled it out. Another text, but this one wasn't from Tom. "You've been warned. It's too late now." Sam's fingers trembled as he read the message. His pulse pounded in his ears. Who was sending these texts? And what do they mean by too late? The lights in the apartment flickered, then went out completely. Sam stood frozen in the pitch-black room, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of something in the darkness, something watching, something moving closer. His phone screen glowed dimly in the dark, and another text came through. "It's here." A soft creak sounded from behind him, like someone stepping on an old wooden floorboard. Sam's breath caught in his throat as he turned slowly, the faint light from his phone barely illuminating the room. But the shadows were deeper now, thicker, as though they were gathering around him. He took a step back, his foot catching on something. His phone slipped from his grasp, clattering to the ground as he stumbled, barely catching himself. The phone screen flickered once, then went dark. Panic surged through him as the room seemed to close in. He had to get out. He had to run. But before he could move, he felt it, a cold, oppressive presence, pressing against him from all sides. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if something unseen was wrapping itself around him. Then, a voice, soft, barely a whisper, breathed into his ear. "Sam." He spun, eyes wide, but there was nothing there, just the darkness. But the voice persisted, low and insistent. "They're already here." His mind reeled, every instinct screaming for him to flee. He bolted for the door, yanking it open with trembling hands. The hallway outside was dimly lit, but it felt like a haven compared to the suffocating dark of Tom's apartment. Sam didn't stop running until he was outside, gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The street was empty, eerily quiet, but for the first time in what felt like hours, he was alone. Or so he thought. As he stood there, catching his breath, his phone buzzed again. He pulled it from his pocket, his hands shaking. "Don't run. It won't help." Sam's eyes darted around, searching the empty street for any sign of movement. The message wasn't from Tom this time, but from a number he didn't recognize. His fingers hovered over the screen, but before he could type a reply, the phone buzzed again. "You can't escape the shadows." And just as the words appeared on the screen, the flickering street lamp across the street blinked back on, casting a long, distorted shadow, one that slowly began to move. Sam's pulse raced as he watched the shadow stretch unnaturally along the pavement, moving with deliberate slowness, almost as if it was savoring the moment. The light from the street lamp flickered again, casting strange patterns across the ground, and the shadow seemed to pulse, growing larger with each flicker. His breath caught in his throat, his mind screaming at him to run, but his legs felt rooted to the spot. There was no sound except for the faint buzzing of the street lamp, yet the silence was thick with tension, with an unbearable sense that something was about to happen. He glanced down at his phone, still clutched in his trembling hand. The screen was dark again, but the last message echoed in his mind. "You can't escape the shadows." Sam's instinct screamed at him to flee, to get as far away as possible, but something about the words felt final, like they were a warning or maybe a promise. He couldn't just run anymore. It wouldn't solve anything. Wherever he went, the shadow would follow. His phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a new message. "It's inside." Sam's heart skipped a beat. Inside? Inside where? He looked around wildly, his eyes scanning the street, the buildings, the shadows stretching from every corner. The words filled him with a sickening dread. Was it talking about him? Was the shadow already inside him, somehow entwined with his very being? He forced himself to move, stumbling forward as he tried to make sense of the situation. The shadow hadn't stopped. It was still creeping toward him, slow and deliberate. He had to find help, find someone who could explain what was happening. Tom had been the only one who knew. But Tom was gone now, dead, and whatever he'd been warning Sam about had come for him next. The memory of Tom's voice, so faint and distorted on the phone, played over and over in Sam's head. "Don't follow the light. Stay away from them." His eyes darted back to the street lamp. Was it the light? Was it these lights? The more he thought about it, the more his mind spiraled. He had been told to stay out of the light, but then the shadows had come for him in the darkness. Where was he supposed to go if neither the light nor the dark were safe? His phone buzzed once more. It's too late to run now. The shadow was almost upon him, stretching across the street like an oil slick, thick and suffocating. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where he was, like it was always meant to find him. Sam backed away, his hands shaking as he fumbled for the keys in his pocket. He turned toward the closest building, a rundown diner, its lights dim but still glowing faintly through the windows. Maybe he could hide inside, just long enough to figure out what to do next. He dashed across the street, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the silence of the night. The shadow followed, slower but relentless, stretching toward him with an unnatural reach. As Sam pulled open the door to the diner, he felt a cold breeze brush past him, as though something invisible had just slipped inside with him. The diner was almost empty, save for a lone man sitting in a booth near the back and an elderly woman behind the counter, wiping down the same spot over and over. The flickering neon sign outside bathed the interior in a sickly glow, casting more shadows across the floor. Sam hurried to the counter, his voice trembling. "Please, I need help." The woman behind the counter barely glanced at him, her eyes distant, as if she hadn't even heard him. Sam's heart pounded harder in his chest. He turned to the man in the booth, but the figure just sat there, unmoving, his back turned. Sam's stomach twisted. The air inside the diner felt wrong, like it was too still, too quiet. He could almost hear his own heart beating in the oppressive silence. His phone buzzed again, louder this time, and the sound made him jump. He pulled it out quickly, dreading what he might see next. "You're in the wrong place." Sam's breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted around the diner. The shadows here felt different, heavier, more substantial. And the man in the booth, the one who hadn't moved, was beginning to feel off, like there was something more to him than just a stranger sitting there, minding his own business. The buzzing of his phone continued, and Sam, with trembling hands, glanced down again. "It's with you now." A chill ran down his spine. The shadow hadn't just followed him. It was already here, lurking in the corners, slipping in through the cracks, waiting for its moment. Suddenly, the man in the booth turned, slowly, his movements unnaturally stiff. Sam's breath hitched as the man's face came into view. His eyes were empty, hollow, like two dark pits that seemed to swallow the light around them. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his mouth stretched into an eerie, twisted smile. Sam stumbled backward, his mind screaming at him to run, to get out, but his body wouldn't cooperate. The man in the booth slowly stood, his shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor, merging with the others. It wasn't just a man anymore. It was something else entirely. The lights flickered again, and Sam's phone buzzed one last time. He didn't need to look to know what it said. "It's here." The shadow surged forward, consuming everything in its path. Sam's last thought before the darkness swallowed him whole was of Tom's final warning. "Don't follow the light." And then, everything went black. The darkness felt thick, suffocating, as if it was alive, pressing against Sam's body, his skin tingling with a cold that seeped into his bones. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The weight of the shadow crushed him from all sides. There was no sound, no light, just an overwhelming void that seemed to stretch on forever. Panic gripped him, his mind racing as he struggled to make sense of where he was, or even if he was still anywhere at all. It felt like the world had been swallowed up, leaving nothing behind but the cold, oppressive blackness. And then, faintly, he heard it, a whisper, soft, barely audible, but distinct in the silence. It was coming from the shadows, surrounding him, speaking directly into his mind. He strained to listen, trying to catch the words, but they were too faint, too elusive. His phone buzzed again, vibrating against his leg in the darkness. Somehow, he could still feel it, still hear it despite the overwhelming void. He reached for it, his hands trembling, fingers searching for the device in his pocket. With a shaky breath, he pulled it out. The screen glowed dimly in the darkness, casting a weak light that did little to penetrate the thick blackness around him. The message on the screen sent a fresh wave of terror through his body. "Don't look behind you." Sam froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him not to turn, not to look. But the more he tried to resist, the more the compulsion grew, gnawing at the edges of his mind. He couldn't help it. The fear was too strong, the unknown too unbearable. Slowly, against his better judgment, he began to turn his head. His heart raced faster with each passing second, a deafening drumbeat in his ears. The shadows seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, closing in tighter, pressing against him, urging him not to look. But he couldn't stop himself. As he turned, the darkness behind him began to shift. At first, it was just a subtle movement like a ripple in water. But then the shape began to take form, an outline, tall and thin, looming over him. The whispering grew louder, clearer now, though Sam still couldn't understand the words. They slithered into his ears, coiling around his mind like tendrils of smoke. He didn't want to look, didn't want to see what was behind him, but it was too late. His body wasn't his own anymore. Finally, his eyes met the figure. It was standing impossibly close, towering over him, its features obscured by the shadows. It had no face, just a swirling mass of darkness where its eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. The void seemed to stretch endlessly within the figure, like staring into a black hole. Sam's body seized with terror. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He was frozen in place, his gaze locked with the faceless shadow in front of him. Then it moved. The figure leaned down slowly, bringing its featureless face closer to Sam's. The whispering was deafening now, the words filling his head, consuming his thoughts. He couldn't tell where the whispers ended and his own mind began. They were one and the same now, a swirling vortex of fear and confusion. Suddenly, the figure's form began to change, twisting and warping. It was no longer just a shadow. It was becoming something else, something more solid. The darkness condensed, pulling itself together, shaping into a form that was disturbingly familiar. The face that emerged from the shadows sent a jolt of icy terror through Sam's body. It was Tom, but not the Tom he remembered. This version of Tom was pale, his eyes hollow and empty, his skin stretched tight over his bones. His mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin, his teeth unnaturally sharp, gleaming in the dim light. Sam. Tom's voice was distorted, an eerie echo of the friend Sam had once known. You shouldn't have ignored the calls. Sam's breath hitched in his throat. This couldn't be real. Tom was dead. He'd been dead for months. There was no way this was happening. You didn't listen. Tom's voice was a low growl now, filled with malice. Now it's your turn. The figure lunged forward, its twisted hands reaching out for Sam. He tried to scream, tried to run, but his body wouldn't move. The shadows held him in place, trapping him in their cold grip as Tom's ghostly form closed in. The world around him began to spin, the darkness swirling faster and faster until everything blurred together. Sam's vision blurred, his mind spinning out of control as the whispers filled every corner of his consciousness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The shadows receded, peeling away from Sam's body like a suffocating blanket being lifted. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. Sam collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, his body trembling uncontrollably. He blinked, his vision slowly clearing, and realized he was no longer in the diner, no longer surrounded by the strange darkness. He was back in his apartment, lying on the floor next to his bed. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. It felt like a dream or a nightmare. But the cold sweat on his skin, the trembling in his limbs, told him it had been all too real. His phone buzzed once more, vibrating against the floor beside him. With shaking hands, he reached for it, dreading what he might see next. The message on the screen was simple, but it sent a fresh wave of dread through Sam's body. It's not over. His phone rang. The caller ID lit up, displaying a familiar name. Tom. Sam stared at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what he had to do. He had to answer it. He had to finish what had been started. With a deep breath, he swiped his thumb across the screen, bringing the phone to his ear. Hello, he whispered, his voice barely audible. The line crackled with static, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, from the other end of the line, Tom's voice, cold, distant, but unmistakable. I told you, Sam. You can't escape the shadows. The line went dead. Sam sat there, the phone still pressed to his ear, staring into the dark void of his apartment. The shadows around him seemed to shift, just out of the corner of his vision, as if they were waiting for the right moment to return. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It was late, too late to be up, but there I was, mindlessly scrolling through my phone in the dim light of my living room. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of settling wood and the hum of the refrigerator. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you, amplifying even the smallest sound. That's when it happened. The phone rang. I frowned, staring at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, with no caller ID, just a string of digits I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. Most of these calls were spam, or worse, some stranger asking for donations. But something about the timing, the quiet, and that nagging feeling in my gut told me to pick up. The phone rang again, persistent, like it wanted to be answered. Against my better judgment, I slid my thumb across the screen and lifted the phone to my ear. Hello. At first, there was nothing, just static on the other end. I was about to hang up when a voice, soft, barely above a whisper, spoke. I know what you did. The words sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the usual telemarketer script, and it certainly wasn't a wrong number. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. Who is this? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Silence again. Then the line went dead. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand, my heart beating a little faster than it should have been. A prank, maybe? But the way the voice had said those words felt too personal, too deliberate. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to some bored kid or a random creep trying to mess with me. Still, the unsettling feeling lingered, like a shadow just out of view. As I got up to turn off the lights and head to bed, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call, but a text. I know everything. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. My first thought was to block the number, to forget the whole thing and go to sleep. But curiosity, fear, maybe, made me hesitate. Before I could think better of it, I typed a response. What are you talking about? 3 dots appeared on the screen, the universal sign that someone was typing back. My heart raced as I waited, half expecting the same cryptic nonsense. But when the reply came, it wasn't vague. The things you've hidden, the secrets you've never told anyone. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a prank. This was specific, too specific. My mind raced, trying to figure out who could be behind this. Was it someone I knew? Someone who knew about the things I'd buried, the parts of my life I kept locked away? My hands were shaking now as I typed back. Who is this? The reply came almost immediately. You'll find out soon enough. Keep your phone close. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. I stood there, staring at my phone, wondering who in the world would do this to me. More importantly, how did they know? But there was no answer. The phone didn't ring again that night, and no more texts came through. Still, sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house, every flicker of light from outside made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and whoever was watching knew my darkest secrets. The next morning, I woke up groggy, my mind still buzzing from the strange call the night before. I tried to go about my day, pushing the encounter to the back of my mind, but it kept creeping back, gnawing at me. The worst part was the lingering feeling of dread, as if something was hanging over me, waiting to strike. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, my phone buzzed again. I felt a jolt of anxiety before I even glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. My heart pounded as I swiped to read the message. Did you sleep well? The fear from the night before came rushing back. Whoever this was, they weren't done. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my neck as I typed back. Who is this? I hit send, my heart racing as I waited for a response. The 3 dots appeared on the screen, and I found myself holding my breath. A moment later, the reply came. You'll see soon enough. I'm just checking in. My stomach twisted at the unsettling nature of the messages. I needed to find out who this was and how they knew me. I glanced at the clock. I still had a few hours before I had to leave for work. Maybe I could dig a little deeper into my own past, just to see if there was any clue as to who might be behind this. I opened my laptop and began scrolling through old emails and social media accounts, looking for anything out of the ordinary. As I sifted through my inbox, I came across a message from an old friend, Derek. We hadn't talked in years. The email was dated months ago, but I hesitated as I read it. Hey, just checking in. Remember that time we got in trouble for sneaking out? Good times. Hope all is well. Let's catch up sometime. I stared at the screen, recalling how Derek had always been the one to push boundaries. We had gotten into a lot of trouble together, and I had some things I'd rather forget. But I shrugged it off. That was years ago, and I hadn't heard from him since. Could he have something to do with the caller? I doubted it. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, snapping me back to reality. Are you afraid? I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the message. I didn't want to respond. Instead, I closed my laptop and paced around my small apartment, trying to think clearly. Who could it be? A former friend? A jilted ex? I racked my brain for anyone who might have a motive to dig into my past. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I glanced out the window. The street was empty, save for a few stray leaves tumbling across the sidewalk. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching me. I needed answers. I decided to reach out to Derek. He might not be the one behind the calls, but he could help me figure out if someone else from our past had resurfaced. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my heart racing as I waited for him to pick up. It rang several times before his voice came through. Hello, Derek. It's been a while. How have you been? Wow, is this really you? I thought I'd lost your number. I've been good, just busy with work. What about you? I hesitated, not wanting to lay all my fears on him right away. Same here, just working a lot. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Sure, what's up? He replied, sounding genuinely curious. I took a breath. Have you heard from anyone from our old group? Like, anyone weird or dangerous? Dangerous? Why do you ask? His tone shifted, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I explained the mysterious calls and the messages I had received, keeping it vague enough not to alarm him too much. Well, that sounds creepy. I haven't heard anything from anyone, but I can ask around. Maybe someone else has had a run-in with a weirdo, he suggested. Yeah, that'd be great. Just let me know if you hear anything. We chatted a little longer before I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. At least I wasn't completely alone in this, but the feeling of being watched lingered. As the day dragged on, I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the calls and messages. Each time my phone buzzed, I tensed, half expecting it to be another eerie text or call. Finally, as evening fell, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I needed to escape the confines of my apartment and the oppressive weight of the unknown. As I strolled through the neighborhood, I kept my phone in my pocket, feeling a strange sense of paranoia wash over me. After about half an hour, I returned home, feeling a little lighter. Maybe the walk had helped clear my mind, but just as I settled down on my couch, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number, and my heart raced as I reached for it. I hesitated, staring at the screen before answering. Hello. The voice on the other end was different this time. Sharp, clear, and very familiar. Hey there. Did you miss me? A cold wave of recognition washed over me, the voice unmistakable. Derek, who else? I told you I'd check around. Turns out, you're not the only one getting creepy messages. My heart dropped as dread filled my chest. The tension hung thick in the air as I awaited Mark's response. I could hear his sharp intake of breath, a sign of his unease that mirrored my own. I had touched a nerve, and I knew it. What do you mean, those calls? He finally asked, his voice low and edged with caution. I've been getting calls from an unknown number. I confessed, choosing my words carefully. They've been mentioning things from our past, things that only we would know. Is this some kind of joke? He snapped, defensiveness rising in his tone. I don't have time for games. It's not a joke, Mark. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. I'm serious. Someone knows about our past, and they're trying to dig up secrets that we thought were buried. Silence fell between us, a heavy, suffocating silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, the memories flooding back. Finally, he let out a long sigh. What do you want from me? I need to know if you've received any strange messages or calls. Anything at all that seems off. He hesitated again, and I could sense him weighing his options. Look, I've gotten a few weird messages lately. They don't say much, just random phrases that don't make sense. I thought it was spam. Spam? I echoed, my heart racing. This isn't just spam. Whoever this is knows details about us, Mark. It's connected to the accident, isn't it? You have to tell me everything you remember. Why? What's it to you now? His voice hardened, defensiveness creeping back. We made our choices back then. We can't change the past. The past. Those words echoed ominously in my mind, and I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. We have to face it. We can't let this person control us. Control us? Mark laughed bitterly. You think we're in control of anything? We've been running from that day for years, and now you want to confront it? It doesn't work that way. I could feel my pulse quickening as I pressed on. We have to find out who this person is. We need to stop them before they expose our secrets. Expose what? You think anyone cares anymore? He retorted, but I could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. They care if it ruins lives, Mark. Don't you remember what happened? I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my emotions. We lost a friend that day. We can't let their memory be tarnished by someone seeking revenge or closure. Revenge, he echoed, the tension in his voice palpable. Who would want revenge? Maybe it's someone we wronged, someone affected by the accident. I could feel the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, the creeping sensation of dread settling over me. Someone who wants to make us pay. Mark was quiet again, the weight of the moment settling between us. What do you want me to do? I want you to meet me, I said, feeling the urgency build. We need to confront this together. We need to figure this out together. Fine, he replied, his tone grudging but resigned. Where do you want to meet? Let's go to the old diner. It's a public place, and I feel like we need to talk face to face. Okay, but I'm not promising anything, he muttered before hanging up. The call left me with a mix of relief and dread. I felt like I was heading into the eye of a storm, the calm before the chaos. I glanced at the clock. I had about an hour before we were supposed to meet. Time felt like a relentless beast, and I was its prey, caught in a web of uncertainty and fear. As I prepared to leave, I glanced at my phone again, hoping for some sign, some message that might illuminate the path ahead. But instead, my heart sank when I saw another text from the unknown number. You're running out of time. They're coming for you. Panic surged through me as I stared at the screen, the implications of the message sinking in. Who was coming for me? I felt a chill creep over my skin, and I could hardly breathe. I quickly typed a reply, trying to regain some semblance of control. Who are you? What do you want from me? But the response came almost immediately. You know what you did. They won't forgive you. I slammed my phone down on the table, feeling the weight of those words. They wouldn't forgive me? Forgive me for what? What could I possibly have done to deserve this torment? A nagging feeling at the back of my mind pushed me to remember. The accident, the night everything changed. In a daze, I pulled on my jacket and left the apartment, the shadows growing longer in the fading light. I drove to the diner, my mind racing with thoughts of Derek, Mark, and the secrets we shared. Upon arriving, I scanned the room for Mark, my anxiety spiking as I noticed he hadn't yet arrived. I slid into a booth near the back, the familiarity of the diner's decor oddly comforting amidst the turmoil. Minutes passed like hours, the ticking of the clock on the wall echoing in my ears. Finally, I saw Mark enter, his posture tense and wary. He spotted me and made his way over, his face a mask of frustration and fear. You're late, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I got caught up, he muttered, sliding into the booth across from me. What's going on? I've been getting more messages, I said, wanting to lay everything out on the table. They're threatening. I think someone is trying to dig up our past. Mark's eyes narrowed as he leaned closer. What do you mean? They mentioned things about the accident, things that only we would know. It feels like they want revenge for what happened. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly agitated. I don't want to be dragged back into this. Can't we just forget? Forget? This isn't going away, Mark. We need to confront it before it consumes us. Fine. What do you suggest? His tone softened, but I could still see the walls he had built around himself. We start by looking into our old friends again. Maybe there's a clue we've missed. As we talked, I felt a sense of urgency build. The past had a way of creeping up on us, clawing at the edges of our present. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. Do you remember that girl, Laura? She was involved in the accident. Mark's expression shifted, his eyes clouding over. Yeah, I remember. She never recovered from it. Do you think she could be involved? I asked, though I already sensed the answer. I don't know, man. But if she's behind this, it changes everything. The weight of his words hung in the air, a tangible dread settling over our conversation. I could see the memories flooding back into his mind. The pain, the guilt, the endless questions of what if. What if we reached out to her? I suggested, though I felt my gut churn at the idea. Are you crazy? She might want to kill us. She blames us for what happened. Maybe she has some information we need, I countered. Or maybe she's just as scared as we are. Scared? Or vengeful? He shot back, and I could see the fear in his eyes. As we continued to discuss our options, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The diner's ambience faded, and a sense of foreboding enveloped us like a shroud. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a new message from the unknown caller. My breath caught in my throat as I opened it. "You're too late. They know everything." Before I could process the message, I felt a rush of air sweep through the diner, a feeling of something dark and ominous drawing closer. I looked up, and my gaze locked with Mark's. The fear in his eyes mirrored my own, and in that moment, we both understood we were running out of time. "Mark, we have to leave. Now," I urged, my heart racing. Without hesitation, we slipped out of the booth and headed toward the door. But just as we stepped outside, I felt a presence behind us. A chill shot down my spine, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. I turned, my pulse pounding in my ears. A figure loomed in the shadows, their face obscured by darkness. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice hissed, sending a shiver down my spine. "Who are you?" I shouted, the panic rising within me. "I'm the one you've been trying to forget," the figure replied, stepping into the light. As the face became visible, my breath caught in my throat. It was someone I never expected to see again, a specter from my past, someone tied irrevocably to the secrets that haunted us. The air around us seemed to still as I stared at the familiar face emerging from the shadows. My heart raced, and my mind spun with disbelief. It was Laura, her once bright eyes now hollow and filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Laura," I whispered, the name barely escaping my lips. The weight of that moment crashed down on me, and I could feel Mark tense beside me. "What do you want?" Mark asked, his voice edged with defiance. "We don't have anything to say to you." Laura stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just forget?" Her voice dripped with resentment, echoing the pain we had all endured. "We're not here to fight," I interjected, trying to defuse the situation. "We just want to understand what happened that night." "Understand?" She laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through the tension like glass. "You think you can just waltz in here and expect me to explain everything? You don't get it. You don't know what it's like to carry this burden." Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me as if seeking permission to retreat. But I stood my ground, feeling an inexplicable pull to confront the past. "Neither do you, Laura. We've all been haunted by it, but we can't let this define us anymore. We need closure." Laura's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, I feared she might lash out. "Closure? You think that's what this is about? You think I've been waiting for you to come and make it all better?" She shook her head, her voice low and filled with despair. "You don't even know the half of it." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my curiosity overriding my fear. "What are you talking about?" "The truth is," she began, her voice dropping to a whisper, "it's not just about that night. It's about everything that came after. The lies, the cover-ups, the way we buried it all deep down and tried to pretend it never happened." Mark crossed his arms, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. "What are you getting at? We all lost something that night." "Yes, we did," she replied, her gaze piercing through me. "But you too, especially you, Max. You ran away. You left me to deal with the aftermath while you pretended it was all behind you." I flinched at her words, guilt washing over me like a tide. "I didn't leave you, Laura." Didn't you?" she interrupted, her voice rising. "You think I haven't watched you move on? You think I haven't seen you live your life while I was left to pick up the pieces? I had to fight for my own survival while you went on like nothing had happened." Her pain resonated with me, a stark reminder of the scars we all carried. I had always thought we were in this together, but maybe I had been blind to the reality of her suffering. "What do you want from us?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What can we do to make this right?" She studied me for a long moment, her expression softening just a fraction. "I want the truth. I want everyone to know what really happened. I want the memories to stop haunting me." Mark shifted again, a hint of doubt creeping into his expression. And how do you expect us to do that? I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But we can't let this go on. It's poisoning us. The calls, the messages, they won't stop until we face it, until we tell our story. My mind raced with possibilities. What if we shared our experience, wrote about the accident, the aftermath, and everything that had led to this moment? Could that be enough to break the cycle of fear and guilt? Maybe we can work together, I suggested cautiously. If we tell our story, it might help us all find some semblance of peace. Laura hesitated, the uncertainty written across her face. You really think that will help? You think people will care about the truth? They will care, I insisted. There are others out there who need to hear it. Maybe we can prevent someone else from going through what we did. Mark nodded slowly, the wheels in his head clearly turning. It might be worth a shot, but we need to do it right. No more hiding. Laura's demeanor shifted, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. You'd really be willing to do that? Absolutely, I replied, feeling a sense of determination wash over me. We owe it to ourselves and to those we lost. As we stood there, a tentative alliance formed among us. The shadows of the past still loomed large. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were finally ready to confront it together. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket again, the familiar weight sending a jolt of anxiety through me. I pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Another message from the unknown caller. You think you can escape your fate? I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. My heart raced, and I glanced at Laura and Mark, who both looked equally alarmed. Who is it? Laura asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, I said, feeling a mixture of fear and determination rise within me. But we can't let this person control us. We have to take charge of our own story. Mark nodded, his resolve strengthening. Let's do it. Let's tell our truth, no matter what it takes. As we stood together in that dimly lit street, the shadows creeping around us, I felt a surge of hope. The darkness may have haunted us for too long, but we were finally ready to face it. Together, we would uncover the truth, confront our fears, and reclaim our lives. And as we walked away from the past, I knew this was just the beginning of our journey, a journey toward healing, redemption, and the power of our shared truth. As we headed toward the diner's back entrance to gather our thoughts, I could feel a sense of purpose building within me. We were not just survivors of a tragedy, we were warriors against our fears. It was time to write the next chapter of our lives, and I was determined to do it with my friends by my side. Are you ready? I asked, looking back at Laura and Mark. They both nodded, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of unity among us. The unknown caller may have tried to intimidate us, but we were ready to rise above it all. And just as we stepped into the diner, I heard a final buzz from my phone. A last message flickered on the screen, but I didn't need to read it. We were no longer bound by the past. We were ready to rewrite our future. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. In the quiet suburbs of Maplewood, where every house seemed to tell a story, stood an unassuming, weathered structure at the end of Elm Street. It was a house that often went unnoticed by passers-by, hidden behind tall hedges and overgrown vines. To most, it was just another home, but to me, it was a haunting reminder of a past I couldn't shake. My name is Clara, and I had lived in Maplewood my entire life. As a child, I would ride my bike past that house, feeling an inexplicable chill whenever I caught a glimpse of its faded exterior. My friends and I often speculated about what lay inside, weaving wild tales of ghostly figures and hidden treasures. Yet, as I grew older, the stories faded into distant memories, until that fateful evening when curiosity drew me back to its doorstep. It was a rainy Friday night when I found myself staring at the house once again. The sky was a deep shade of gray, with clouds swirling ominously overhead. A chill crept through the air, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. My heart raced as I stood at the edge of the driveway, feeling an irresistible pull toward the front door. I had no real reason to be there, yet something deep within me urged me forward, as if the house itself was calling my name. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking beneath my weight. The door stood slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. I hesitated for a moment, glancing around to ensure I was alone. The street was empty, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was shrouded in darkness, the heavy curtains blocking out any remnants of daylight. Dust motes danced in the air as I moved further in, the floorboards groaning under my feet. The living room was cluttered with forgotten memories. Old furniture draped in white sheets, family photos hanging crookedly on the walls, and bookshelves filled with dust-covered tomes. A sense of nostalgia washed over me as I scanned the room, each item whispering secrets of the past. But it was the staircase that caught my attention. It spiraled upward, disappearing into the shadows above. I felt a magnetic pull toward it, a desire to uncover what lay beyond. I took a step closer, my hand grazing the banister as I ascended the stairs. With each step, the air grew heavier, a sense of foreboding wrapping around me like a shroud. Reaching the landing, I was greeted by a long hallway lined with closed doors. Each one seemed to hold its own mystery, but it was the door at the end of the hall that beckoned to me most. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out from within. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard it, a faint sound echoing through the stillness. Footsteps. They were soft, almost inaudible, yet unmistakably present. I paused, my breath hitching in my throat. Who could be here? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. My mind raced with possibilities. Was someone else exploring this forgotten house? Or was it merely a figment of my imagination? Drawing in a shaky breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The room was empty, bathed in an eerie glow from the single light bulb hanging overhead. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. I stepped inside, scanning the room for any sign of life. But there was nothing, just an unmade bed, a small desk littered with papers, and an overwhelming sense of desolation. It was as if time had stood still within these walls, preserving moments long forgotten. Then I heard it again, the footsteps now louder and more distinct. They seemed to originate from the hallway behind me. Panic surged through me, and I spun around, my heart racing as I searched for the source. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. "Is anyone there?" No response. I took a hesitant step back toward the door, my instincts screaming at me to leave. But just as I reached for the knob, the footsteps grew closer, echoing in the empty room like a heartbeat in the dark. My breath quickened, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I was no longer alone. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted. The room felt charged with energy, as if something had awakened from its slumber. Shadows danced on the walls, and I could feel an unseen presence pressing in around me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a ghost? A lingering spirit trapped in the house? Just then, the light flickered, casting the room into momentary darkness. I gasped, stumbling back as my heart raced in my chest. When the light returned, I could have sworn I saw a figure in the corner of the room, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to dissolve into the walls as quickly as it appeared. Fear gripped me, and I bolted for the door, throwing it open and rushing into the hallway. The footsteps had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that enveloped me. I darted down the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears, and burst through the front door into the cool night air. Outside, I gasped for breath, my pulse racing. I stumbled down the porch steps, glancing back at the house that had held me captive for just a moment too long. The window in the empty room flickered, as if acknowledging my escape, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and longing. What had I stumbled upon in that house? What secrets lay buried within its walls? As I walked away, the rain began to fall, washing away the remnants of my fear. I knew that I couldn't leave the mystery unsolved. The footsteps, the shadow, they called to me. I would return. The unknown awaited, and I was determined to uncover the truth behind the empty room and the footsteps that led me there. Days passed since my initial encounter with the eerie house at the end of Elm Street, and the memories haunted me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I tried to return to my normal routine, attending work at the local library, meeting friends for coffee, and indulging in my passion for reading. Yet, every moment of silence reminded me of that dark room, the ominous footsteps, and the shadow that seemed to beckon me deeper into the unknown. The rain had settled into a pattern, drenching the town in an endless drizzle that blurred the edges of reality. On one particularly gloomy afternoon, I found myself at the library, surrounded by rows of dusty books that offered tales of mystery and intrigue. As I sorted through the shelves, my fingers brushed against a worn volume titled Local Legends of Maplewood. Intrigued, I pulled it from the shelf and settled into a corner nook. As I flipped through the pages, I came across a section that detailed the history of the very house I had entered. It spoke of the original owner, a reclusive woman named Eleanor Hawthorne, who had vanished without a trace over 50 years ago. The townsfolk had whispered rumors of strange happenings in her home, unexplained noises, flickering lights, and even sightings of a ghostly figure wandering the halls. The legend stirred something within me, igniting a flicker of determination. If Eleanor's story held any truth, perhaps it would lead me to understand the phenomena I had encountered. I felt an overwhelming urge to uncover what had happened to her, and why the house still held such a powerful grip on its secrets. That night, armed with newfound resolve, I revisited the house. The sky was a deep indigo, illuminated by the occasional flash of lightning that cast a fleeting glow upon the world. As I approached the front door, my heart raced with both excitement and fear. The house loomed above me, a silent guardian of secrets long buried. I had to know what lay inside. I pushed the door open, the familiar creak sending a shiver down my spine. The air felt charged, thick with the weight of history. This time, however, I wasn't paralyzed by fear. I had a purpose. I stepped inside, breathing in the scent of aged wood and dust, and began my exploration anew. With a flashlight in hand, I navigated through the living room, this time noting the intricate carvings on the fireplace mantel and the family portraits that seemed to follow my every move. I made my way to the staircase, my pulse quickening as I climbed to the second floor. The door at the end of the hallway awaited me, calling to my curiosity. When I reached it, I hesitated for a moment. The last time I had stepped into that room, I had been overwhelmed by fear. But now, armed with the knowledge of Eleanor Hawthorne's story, I felt a sense of empowerment. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room looked the same as it had before, but now it felt different, charged with a sense of purpose. I scanned the walls for any clues, my flashlight illuminating the dust that swirled in the air. It was then I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a faint outline of a door behind a tattered old rug, barely visible but undeniable. My heart raced with excitement. Was this the key to unraveling the mystery? I knelt down, pulling the rug aside to reveal a small wooden door embedded in the floor. It was old, with rusty hinges that had likely not been opened in years. The door seemed to call to me, whispering secrets of the past. With trembling hands, I grasped the doorknob and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase that descended into the unknown. Taking a deep breath, I felt a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration wash over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I switched off my flashlight, fearing the beam would attract unwanted attention, and carefully descended the stairs, relying on the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in a small, dimly lit room. The air was musty, thick with the scent of decay. The walls were lined with shelves crammed full of boxes, each labeled with Eleanor's name and dates from decades past. My heart raced as I stepped closer, curiosity piquing at the prospect of uncovering Eleanor's forgotten treasures. I opened the first box, filled with old letters, their edges yellowed and frayed. As I read through them, my heart sank. They were love letters, filled with passion and longing, penned to a man named Thomas. The correspondence revealed a deep connection between Eleanor and Thomas, a romance that had bloomed in secrecy. Yet as the letters progressed, the tone shifted, darker, more foreboding. Eleanor's words hinted at danger, whispers of betrayal that echoed through time. Each letter unfolded more of Eleanor's story, leading me to believe that she had not simply vanished. She had escaped something sinister. I became lost in her world, feeling her fear and determination pulse through the pages. But why had she left behind this collection? Was it a warning or a call for help? Just as I began to piece together her story, a sudden noise echoed from above, breaking my concentration. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, resonated through the floorboards, vibrating through the small room. Panic surged through me as I realized I was not alone. I quickly gathered the letters, stuffing them into my backpack, and scrambled for the staircase. Heart racing, I clambered up the steps and froze at the top, listening intently. The footsteps had stopped. I peered through the narrow gap of the door, but the hallway lay in ominous silence. Taking a steadying breath, I opened the door slowly, half expecting to see a shadow lurking just beyond. But the hallway was empty, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I hurried down the hall and descended the staircase, the familiar creaking sounds echoing my growing anxiety. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the weight of what I had uncovered pressing heavily on my mind. Eleanor's letters had opened a door to her life, a life filled with love, fear, and mystery. But as I walked away from the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that my exploration had awakened something long dormant. The footsteps that had led me to that empty room felt like a warning, a signal that I was intruding on something better left undisturbed. The rain began to fall again, mingling with my thoughts as I made my way home. The mystery of Eleanor Hawthorne was far from over. If anything, it had just begun. The more I uncovered, the more questions arose. Who was Thomas? What had happened between them? And why had I heard those footsteps, as if someone, or something, was trying to protect the secrets of the past? I knew I had to return to the house, but I needed a plan. I needed to dig deeper into the shadows that surrounded Eleanor's life and the secrets that had lingered long after her departure. There was a story waiting to be told, and I was determined to be the one to tell it. The days that followed my discovery were a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. I could hardly focus on anything else. The unanswered questions gnawed at my mind like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Eleanor's letters had ignited a fire within me, compelling me to unravel the truth behind her disappearance and the ominous footsteps that had haunted my encounters with the old house. I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers lay within those walls, waiting to be uncovered. After a few restless nights, I decided it was time to gather more information about Eleanor Hawthorne and the mysterious Thomas. I headed to the local historical society, a small building nestled between a quaint coffee shop and a florist, where the scent of fresh blooms mingled with the rich aroma of brewing coffee. Inside, the walls were adorned with photographs and articles chronicling the town's history, the faded colors hinting at the stories they contained. As I entered, I was greeted by a friendly woman behind the front desk. "Hello, how can I help you today?" she asked, her smile warm and inviting. "I'm looking for information about Eleanor Hawthorne," I replied, my heart racing at the prospect of unearthing more about her life. "Ah, Eleanor. She was quite the enigmatic figure around here," the woman said, her eyes sparkling with intrigue. "We have some records on her. Please, have a seat, and I'll fetch what I can find." I settled into an old wooden chair, the creak of the seat echoing my mounting excitement. After a few moments, the woman returned with a stack of documents and a few old newspaper clippings. "Here you go. This might help you get a better picture of her life." As I sifted through the papers, a vivid portrait of Eleanor began to emerge. She had been a vibrant woman, known for her intelligence and beauty. Her family had lived in Maplewood for generations, and she had once been a beloved member of the community. But as I read deeper into the articles, the narrative shifted. There were whispers of a tragic event that had marred her reputation, rumors of a scandal involving her relationship with Thomas, a man from the wrong side of town. One article caught my attention. It detailed an incident that had occurred just weeks before Eleanor vanished. According to the report, she had been seen arguing with Thomas in the town square, their voices raised in anger. Witnesses claimed that Thomas had stormed off, leaving Eleanor distraught. The article hinted at a web of jealousy and betrayal, suggesting that their love had taken a dark turn. My mind raced with the implications. Had Thomas been involved in her disappearance? What had transpired between them in those final days? I flipped through more articles, each revealing snippets of their relationship, a passionate love affair that had soured into mistrust and suspicion. With each revelation, I felt a mix of empathy and dread. Eleanor had been trapped in a world of secrets and lies, a victim of circumstances that had spiraled out of her control. But what about the footsteps I had heard? Were they echoes of her past, or something more sinister? Determined to dig deeper, I asked the woman at the Historical Society if there were any local archives where I could find more information about Eleanor's life. She directed me to a small room at the back of the building filled with boxes of records and old books. "You might find more details there," she said encouragingly. I thanked her and made my way to the archive room, where the dim light illuminated dusty shelves overflowing with forgotten histories. I began to comb through the boxes, searching for anything related to Eleanor Hawthorne. Hours slipped by as I pored over records, uncovering fragments of her life, birth certificates, property deeds, and even old photographs of her with friends and family. Yet, every piece of paper seemed to amplify the mystery rather than clarify it. As I rifled through the last box, I stumbled upon a folder labeled Eleanor's Correspondence. My heart raced at the prospect of finding more letters, perhaps ones that were even more revealing than those I had discovered in the hidden room. I opened the folder with trembling hands and found a series of letters addressed to Eleanor, each one more frantic than the last. "Eleanor, I'm worried about you. Please respond. I need to know you're safe." One letter read, signed simply T. I felt a chill run down my spine. This could only be Thomas. The letters painted a picture of a man in turmoil, desperate to reach out to Eleanor, but filled with regret and guilt. As I continued reading, it became clear that Thomas had been trying to protect her. But from what? The letters hinted at a danger lurking in the shadows, a threat that had forced Eleanor to isolate herself from the world. The last letter in the folder sent a shiver through me. "I know what you've done, and I will find you. You can't hide forever," it warned, signed with a name I didn't recognize. M. What had Eleanor done? Who was this mysterious M? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but they only deepened the sense of dread that had settled in my stomach. I had to confront the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. Leaving the Historical Society with my head spinning, I felt a sense of urgency to return to the house. I needed to piece together the remnants of Eleanor's past, to confront whatever had been left behind. The shadows in the house held secrets, and I was determined to bring them to light. That night, the rain fell heavily, drumming against my window as I prepared for my return. I gathered the letters, the newspaper clippings, and the newfound knowledge I had acquired. Armed with my flashlight and a notebook to document my findings, I felt ready to face whatever awaited me. As I stepped into the house once more, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The familiar creak of the door echoed in the stillness, a reminder that I was intruding upon a space steeped in history. I made my way up to the second floor, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. This time, I approached the small door I had discovered, a heavy weight of history pressing down upon me. I knelt before it again, my pulse quickening as I opened it once more. The narrow staircase welcomed me into the dimly lit room below. With each step down, the air grew cooler, thick with an unshakable tension. I reached the bottom and scanned the room, the shelves still lined with boxes that held Eleanor's past. But now, I felt as though the room itself was watching me, the shadows lurking just out of sight. Determined to explore further, I rifled through the boxes, my heart pounding in my chest. As I sifted through the contents, I uncovered more letters, journals, and personal items that had once belonged to Eleanor. Each discovery felt like a step closer to understanding her life, her fears, and her ultimate fate. One box in particular caught my eye. It was smaller than the others and adorned with intricate carvings that looked remarkably similar to those on the fireplace mantel in the living room. I lifted the lid, revealing a collection of delicate trinkets, lockets, rings, and a small diary bound in worn leather. My hands trembled as I opened the diary, its pages yellowed and fragile. The first entry was dated just days before Eleanor's disappearance. I can feel the walls closing in on me. I don't know who to trust anymore. Thomas seems different, as if he's hiding something from me. I can't shake the feeling that someone is watching. The words leapt off the page. echoing the fears I had sensed in her letters. The diary became a window into Eleanor's soul, her innermost thoughts laid bare for me to witness. She wrote about her love for Thomas, but also about the growing paranoia that had begun to consume her. There's a darkness in this town that I can't ignore. I've heard whispers, seen shadows that linger just out of sight. It feels as though someone is always watching me. The air grew colder as I read, the tension palpable in the silence of the room. I flipped through the pages, eager to understand her fears and the dangers that surrounded her. Then I found a page torn in half, the edges frayed. I must confront him, it read. If I don't, I fear I'll lose everything. I have to know the truth. The urgency in her words sent chills down my spine. I felt an overwhelming need to uncover the truth behind Eleanor's life and the secrets she had left behind. It was clear that something had gone terribly wrong, and I was now entwined in her story. Just then, a loud crash echoed from above, shaking me from my thoughts. I snapped the diary shut and listened intently, my heart pounding. The sound reverberated through the floorboards, and I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through me. Was I truly alone in the house, or had something, or someone, returned to guard its secrets? As I climbed back up the narrow staircase, my flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows across the walls. I reached the top and stepped into the hallway, my heart racing as I scanned the area. Every creak of the floorboards echoed the fear that gripped me, but I couldn't back down now. With determined steps, I approached the doorway leading to the room I had first entered. I had to confront whatever awaited me, to face the shadows that had haunted me since the day I discovered the house. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the familiar scene. But now, it felt different, charged with an energy that sent shivers down my spine. I stepped inside, feeling the weight of Eleanor's presence enveloping me. The room felt alive, as if the very walls were whispering the secrets of the past. I scanned the dim space, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Every corner seemed to harbor shadows that danced just beyond the reach of my flashlight. With my heart pounding, I decided to check the closet that had initially caught my attention. It had seemed innocuous at first, but now it felt like the gateway to understanding Eleanor's fate. I approached the wooden door cautiously, feeling the cool air emanating from within as I pulled it open. Inside, I found an array of old coats, hats, and a few dusty boxes that had been neglected for years. As I rummaged through the garments, I caught sight of something glinting in the back, a small, ornate box hidden beneath a pile of moth-eaten fabric. My pulse quickened as I reached for it, the delicate craftsmanship drawing me in. The box was intricately carved, its surface decorated with swirling patterns and faint symbols that resembled those I had seen earlier. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid, the hinges creaking like old bones protesting after years of disuse. Inside, I discovered a collection of faded photographs, each depicting Eleanor in various stages of her life. Some showed her laughing with friends, while others captured her deep in thought, her expression shrouded in melancholy. Among the photographs, one stood out. It was a candid shot of Eleanor sitting on the front porch of the house, her face lit up by the soft glow of the setting sun. But in the background, just barely visible, was a shadowy figure standing behind a tree. The figure was obscured, but I could make out the outline of a man, his posture rigid and menacing. My stomach twisted at the sight. It felt as if this photograph held the key to Eleanor's fears. Flipping the photograph over, I found a hastily scribbled note on the back. I can't escape him. He knows my secrets. The words sent a chill through me, confirming that Eleanor had been living in fear of someone who had managed to infiltrate her life in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. With renewed determination, I knew I had to confront this figure, this unknown threat that loomed in the shadows of Eleanor's past. My thoughts raced, piecing together the fragments of information I had gathered. Who was this man? Why had he tormented Eleanor? And how was he connected to the footsteps that led to the empty room? As I continued to sift through the box, I uncovered more unsettling details. A small journal lay hidden at the bottom, its pages filled with Eleanor's writing. It felt heavier than the photographs, as if it contained all her fears and frustrations. I opened it, my fingers trembling as I scanned the neat script. The entries were dated over several months, chronicling her spiraling descent into paranoia. "He watches me from the shadows," she wrote in one entry. "Every night, I hear footsteps outside my window. I thought it was just my imagination, but now I know he's real." Each line dripped with the weight of her despair, and I could almost hear her voice echoing through the pages. "I've started to receive letters," another entry read. "They come anonymously, filled with secrets from my past, things I thought I had buried. It's as if someone knows everything about me, and they're using it to control me." As I read further, I discovered an entry that made my blood run cold. "I can't trust Thomas anymore. He's been acting strangely, like he knows more than he's letting on. I fear that he's in league with a man who's been stalking me." My heart raced. The very person I thought might have been a victim himself now seemed to have been part of the danger surrounding Eleanor. I flipped to the last entry, my breath hitching in my throat. "I'm going to confront him. I can't live in fear any longer. I have to know who he is, why he's doing this. Tomorrow, I'll go to the old barn on the outskirts of town. He'll be there. I have to end this." The words felt like a dagger to my heart. Eleanor had intended to confront her tormentor, and in doing so, she had disappeared without a trace. The realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was retracing her steps, standing on the brink of uncovering the truth that had eluded me for so long. The weight of the journal felt heavy in my hands as I closed it. I could sense that my own confrontation was inevitable, that I too would have to face whatever darkness lingered in the shadows. As I stood in the eerie silence of the room, the atmosphere shifted, the very air thickening with tension. Suddenly, I heard it again, the soft echo of footsteps reverberating through the hallway. My heart raced, and I froze, straining to listen. They were faint but unmistakable, rhythmic and deliberate, as if someone was approaching. I felt a surge of fear, but also an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth. Summoning my courage, I stepped out of the closet and into the hallway, the shadows dancing around me as I advanced toward the source of the sound. Each footfall reverberated in my mind, reminding me of Eleanor's words, of her fear, her desperation, and the darkness that had claimed her. As I turned the corner, the footsteps ceased. I felt a cold chill wash over me, sending shivers down my spine. The hallway was empty, the silence oppressive, yet I could sense that I was not alone. Someone, or something, was watching me. Determined not to be paralyzed by fear, I made my way to the staircase leading to the attic. The house creaked and groaned, echoing the anxiety that pulsed through me. I reached for the door, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As I opened it, the attic revealed itself. A vast, dimly lit space filled with old furniture and forgotten memories. The atmosphere felt heavy, laden with secrets that had been hidden away for far too long. I took a tentative step inside, my flashlight illuminating dust motes floating in the air. As I scanned the room, my breath caught in my throat. There, in the far corner, stood a figure shrouded in darkness. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. The figure remained still, hidden in the shadows, a haunting silhouette that sent a wave of dread coursing through me. In response, the figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. It was Thomas. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The sorrow etched on his features was palpable, and I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. "You shouldn't be here." "Where is she, Thomas?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "What happened to Eleanor?" Thomas's expression shifted, anguish replacing his earlier demeanor. "You don't understand. I tried to protect her, but it was too late. She was being hunted by someone we both knew." "What do you mean?" I pressed, my mind racing. "Who was after her? Who knows her secrets?" His gaze dropped to the floor, and he took a deep breath before speaking. "It was my fault. I thought I could shield her from the truth. But the past has a way of resurfacing, no matter how hard we try to bury it." As he spoke, my mind flooded with memories of the letters I had read, the entries in Eleanor's diary, the shadows lurking in the corners of the house. "You have to tell me everything, Thomas. I can't piece this together alone." He hesitated, the weight of his past evident in his eyes. "We both loved her, But I was the one who betrayed her trust. I didn't believe her when she said someone was after her. I thought she was imagining things. Imagining things? I exclaimed, frustration boiling over. Eleanor was terrified. She had evidence, letters, everything. You must know something. Finally, Thomas's gaze met mine, a storm of emotions swirling within him. There were whispers in the town, rumors about her family's history. They said her father had crossed paths with someone dangerous, a debt that was never settled. I tried to shield her from it, but it followed her, and now it's coming for you too. The gravity of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. Eleanor's disappearance was not just a tragic event. It was tied to a history of darkness that had haunted her family. I realized that I was entangled in a web of secrets that threatened to consume me as well. We have to find out who this person is, I insisted. I won't let Eleanor's fate be forgotten. We have to confront them, together. Thomas nodded, a flicker of determination igniting in his eyes. You're right. We can't let fear dictate our actions any longer. We need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As we prepared to face the unknown, I felt a surge of hope amidst the dread. Together, we would unravel the mystery that had taken so much from us. But as we stepped out of the attic, the weight of the secrets we carried felt heavier than ever. Little did I know, the real danger was only just beginning to reveal itself. The air was thick with anticipation as Thomas and I descended the creaky stairs, the weight of our shared knowledge pressing heavily upon us. With each step, I could feel the specter of Eleanor's fate looming closer, wrapping around us like an oppressive fog. The house, once merely a structure filled with memories, now felt like a battleground, one where secrets could either protect us or destroy us. The plan was simple yet daunting. We needed to confront the unknown figure who had haunted Eleanor and now loomed over us. I felt a mixture of fear and determination coursing through me, propelling me forward. Where do we start? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremors of anxiety gripping my stomach. The old barn, Thomas replied, his expression grim. It's where Eleanor said she would meet him. I never believed she would actually go, but now, he trailed off, the weight of regret evident in his eyes. I nodded, resolving myself to the task ahead. The barn was just outside of town, a place that had been abandoned for years, but it had a history steeped in darkness. We needed to uncover the truth, and the barn felt like the epicenter of all Eleanor's fears. As we made our way through the dusky streets, the shadows stretched ominously around us, the faint sounds of night echoing in the distance. I could feel the tension mounting between us, a shared sense of urgency binding us. We were heading into the unknown, armed only with the remnants of Eleanor's past and the hope that we could still find answers. Upon reaching the barn, its imposing structure loomed before us, cloaked in shadows and silence. The wooden beams creaked in the breeze, and the air was thick with the scent of hay and decay. I felt a shiver run down my spine as we approached the entrance, where a rusty padlock hung loosely, as if inviting us inside. Are you ready? Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I could see the fear in his eyes mirrored in my own, but there was no turning back now. I took a deep breath and nodded. With a push, the barn door swung open, revealing a cavernous space filled with remnants of a forgotten era, dusty old farming equipment, scattered hay bales, and the faint outline of what once was a thriving livelihood. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the walls, casting eerie patterns on the ground. As we stepped inside, the sound of our footsteps echoed ominously, breaking the heavy silence. I could feel the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on me, each heartbeat a reminder of the danger that lay ahead. We need to split up and look for anything that seems out of place, I suggested, trying to mask the unease in my voice. Agreed, Thomas replied, though I could see the hesitation in his eyes. Just stay close. We began our search, moving through the dimly lit space. I rifled through old boxes filled with rusted tools, remnants of a life that once bustled here, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Eleanor. What had she discovered in this place? What had driven her to confront her fears in such a desolate setting? Suddenly, I heard a noise, a faint rustling coming from the far corner of the barn. I froze, straining to listen. It was as if something or someone was shifting in the shadows. My heart raced as I exchanged a glance with Thomas, who had also caught the sound. We moved cautiously toward the noise, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back. As we approached, the air grew colder, sending chills down my spine. I shined my flashlight into the corner, and there, half hidden behind a stack of hay bales, was a figure cloaked in darkness. I gasped, stepping back instinctively, the beam of light flickering as I trembled. "Who's there?" Thomas called out, his voice steadier than mine. The figure didn't move, remaining eerily still as the tension in the air grew thicker. In a moment that felt like an eternity, the figure finally stepped forward, revealing a face that sent shockwaves through me. It was a man I recognized from Eleanor's photographs, the shadowy figure lurking behind her on the porch. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low and menacing. Eleanor was warned about the consequences of digging too deep. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound strong. "What do you want with Eleanor?" He chuckled darkly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "She was a curious one, wasn't she? Always poking around where she didn't belong. But you're different. You ventured into a world that's best left untouched." Thomas stepped forward, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You think you can intimidate us? Eleanor deserves to know the truth, and so do we." The man's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "Truth? You really want to know the truth? Then listen carefully." Eleanor was tied to a legacy, a debt that was never settled by her father. The past has a way of catching up, and she became a target. My heart raced as his words sank in. The secrets that had haunted Eleanor were entwined with her family's history, and now they threatened to ensnare me as well. "What do you mean? What debt?" He stepped closer, the moonlight illuminating his features, sharp and angular, with a sinister glint in his eyes. Her father made deals with dangerous people. When he disappeared, the debt fell to Eleanor. She thought she could escape it, but it found her, just as it finds you. "What do you want from us?" I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by anger and desperation. "I want nothing from you, but you've stumbled into something far beyond your understanding," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "If you wish to save yourselves, you'll abandon this quest. Forget about Eleanor. Forget about the past." But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Eleanor deserves justice. She deserves to be found, I insisted, the fire in my voice burning brighter. He shook his head, a look of contempt crossing his face. "You're a fool if you think you can save her. There are forces at play that you cannot comprehend. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Before I could respond, Thomas lunged forward, fists clenched. "You're the one who's been stalking her, aren't you? You're the reason she's gone." The man's demeanor shifted, his cold facade cracking as he took a step back. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. I only acted as a reminder of the danger she faced. But if you continue down this path, you'll become part of that danger. Just as I felt the air grow thick with tension, a loud crash echoed through the barn, shaking the very foundations of the building. The man's eyes widened in alarm as the door swung open, revealing a group of shadowy figures standing in the entrance, menacing silhouettes against the dim light. "Time's up," the leader of the group said, stepping into the barn with an air of authority. He was older, his face weathered but eyes sharp and piercing. "We've been waiting for this moment." Panic surged through me as I realized the magnitude of the situation. The very forces that had claimed Eleanor were now converging on us. "Run!" I shouted to Thomas, adrenaline kicking in as I grabbed his arm. We had to escape this place, this confrontation that had spiraled out of control. But as we turned to flee, the men blocked our path, their intentions clear in their predatory stances. The tension escalated to a breaking point, and I felt the weight of Eleanor's memory urging me to fight, to resist. In that moment, I made a choice. We had to confront the past together. I would not let fear dictate my actions any longer. "Get ready," I whispered to Thomas, the resolve hardening in my chest. We're not going down without a fight. The battle for the truth and for our lives had just begun. The air crackled with tension as Thomas and I stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the menacing figures that blocked our escape. The leader of the group, his eyes cold and calculating, surveyed us as if we were mere pawns in a game he had mastered long ago. We were outnumbered, but the fire ignited by Eleanor's memory propelled us forward. "Step aside," he commanded, his voice low and authoritative. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the urgency of our situation. "We know more than you think," I replied, forcing myself to sound braver than I felt. "We know about Eleanor, and we're not leaving until we uncover the truth." A flicker of surprise crossed the leader's face, quickly replaced by a smirk. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Either way, you've made your choice." Without warning, he lunged forward, and chaos erupted in the barn. Thomas and I instinctively moved to the side, narrowly avoiding the grab of one of the henchmen. The adrenaline surged through my veins as we broke into a sprint, searching for an exit amidst the chaos. I could hear the heavy footsteps of our pursuers behind us, the shouts echoing through the vast space. We darted between the old farming equipment, desperately searching for a way out. My mind raced, strategizing our next move. "We need to get to the back of the barn," I shouted to Thomas, who was keeping pace beside me, his face determined but showing signs of fear. "There might be a window or a way out." As we dashed through the dimly lit barn, I caught a glimpse of the old loft above, the wooden beams creaking under the weight of time and secrets. An idea sparked in my mind. "Thomas, we can climb up. It might give us a way to escape." Without waiting for a response, I sprinted toward the ladder that led to the loft. The sound of footsteps grew closer, but the urgency to escape fueled my determination. I climbed swiftly, glancing back to ensure Thomas was following. He was right behind me, his breath heavy but his resolve unwavering. Reaching the loft, I quickly scanned the area, searching for an exit. The windows were dusty and old, some partially boarded up, but one near the back stood slightly ajar, the cool night air wafting in. I rushed over to it, struggling to pry it open as the sounds of chaos grew louder below. "Help me," I called to Thomas, my fingers fumbling as I pushed against the window. Together, we forced it open just enough to squeeze through. I felt a rush of relief wash over me as I climbed out, landing on the soft grass outside the barn. But there was no time to celebrate. I could hear the shouts of the men echoing from below, the sound of their anger reverberating through the barn walls. "They're coming," I warned Thomas, who was right behind me, his eyes wide with fear. We took off running, the adrenaline propelling us forward as we darted through the darkened field, heading away from the barn and the danger that lurked within. The night sky was filled with stars, their light illuminating our path as we moved farther away from the chaos. "We need to find somewhere safe," Thomas panted, glancing back toward the barn. "They won't give up easily." I nodded, scanning the area for shelter. Just ahead, I spotted a small shed, its silhouette outlined against the night sky. "There, we can hide in there," I suggested, pointing toward the structure. We hurried over, ducking inside the shed, just as we heard the barn door crash open behind us. The sounds of footsteps grew louder as the men began their pursuit, their voices angry and frantic. "This way," I urged Thomas, motioning for him to follow me to the back of the shed, where a stack of old crates loomed against the wall. We crouched down behind them, holding our breath as we listened to the voices draw closer. "Split up," one of the men shouted. "They can't have gone far." I could feel my heart racing, each pulse echoing in my ears as I tried to keep still. The footsteps moved past our hiding spot, the voices growing fainter as they searched the area. Relief washed over me, but I knew we couldn't stay hidden for long. "We need to come up with a plan," I whispered to Thomas, my mind racing with possibilities. "We can't just run forever." He nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What if we turn the tables? If we can find evidence against them, maybe we can report it to the police." The idea sparked a flicker of hope in my chest. Yes, if we can gather enough proof about Eleanor and their connections, we might be able to expose them. Just as we began to formulate our plan, the door to the shed creaked open, the silhouette of one of the men appearing in the doorway. "I know you're in here," he called, his voice dripping with menace. Without thinking, I reached for a rusty shovel that leaned against the wall. "Get ready," I whispered to Thomas, adrenaline surging through me as I prepared to confront our pursuer. The man stepped inside, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the shed. "You think you can hide from us? You have no idea what you're up against." With a sudden rush of courage, I swung the shovel at him, catching him off guard. The impact sent him stumbling back, and Thomas seized the opportunity, shoving him out of the way as we darted past. "Go! Go!" I shouted, pushing forward as we burst out of the shed and into the night. We ran, fueled by a mix of fear and determination, not daring to look back. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind us, but we pressed on, our feet pounding against the earth. As we reached the edge of the woods, the darkness seemed to swallow us whole, wrapping around us like a protective cloak. We ducked behind a tree, breathless and trembling, listening for the sounds of our pursuers. "We need to keep moving," Thomas urged, glancing back toward the direction of the barn. "They'll be looking for us." I nodded, trying to catch my breath. "Let's head toward town. There's a police station a few blocks away. If we can make it there, we can report what we've found." Together, we crept through the trees, carefully avoiding any fallen branches or leaves that might give us away. The woods felt alive with sounds, rustling leaves, distant animal calls. But we pressed on, focused on our goal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of running, we emerged from the trees and onto the familiar streets of our town. The streetlights flickered above us, casting an eerie glow on the pavement, but we didn't stop. We hurried toward the police station, our hearts racing with urgency. As we approached the building, my thoughts raced. Would they believe us? Would they take our claims seriously? But we had to try. We had to find justice for Eleanor. We burst through the doors of the police station, breathless and disheveled. The officer at the front desk looked up, his eyes widening in surprise. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etched across his face. "Please, we need help," I gasped, the words spilling out in a rush. "There are men who are connected to a woman who disappeared. Eleanor. We found out what happened to her." "Slow down," the officer said, standing up and gesturing for us to sit down. "Take a deep breath and explain." We quickly relayed everything. The strange phone calls, the encounter in the barn, the figure we'd seen. I could feel the weight of our story pressing down on me, the urgency of our mission fueling my determination. After what felt like an eternity of explaining, the officer nodded, taking notes. "We'll send a unit out to investigate the barn and look for these individuals," he assured us. "You did the right thing by coming here." Just as I began to feel a glimmer of hope, the door swung open again, and a man stepped in, one of the figures from the barn. My heart sank as I recognized him. "You shouldn't have come here," he growled, eyes locked onto ours. Panic surged through me as I realized we were still not safe. But before I could react, the officer stepped forward, his tone authoritative. "Back away from them. You're not welcome here. Don't you understand? They don't know what they're messing with," the man shouted, his face twisted with rage. But Thomas and I stood our ground, feeling the strength of our convictions solidifying between us. "We do know," I said defiantly, "and we won't back down until we uncover the truth." The standoff was palpable, and in that moment, I realized that this was it. We had entered a battle not just for Eleanor's legacy, but for our own futures. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but we had each other, and the truth on our side. As the officers moved in, the tension in the room began to shift. We had sparked something that couldn't be extinguished. The fight for justice had begun, and we were ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. In a quaint town nestled between rolling hills and lush greenery, there stood an old Victorian house that had long been the subject of local lore and whispered secrets. Its once vibrant paint had faded to a dull gray, and the ornate details of its architecture were slowly succumbing to the relentless grip of time. The townsfolk regarded the house with a mix of curiosity and trepidation, for it was said to be haunted by the spirit of a girl who had lived there many decades ago. The house had a way of drawing the attention of passers-by, its tall, narrow windows resembling watchful eyes, observing every movement in the world outside. It loomed at the end of a winding dirt road, isolated from the rest of the town, surrounded by a wild garden that had grown untamed over the years. Weeds twisted around the wrought iron gate, and ivy clung stubbornly to the crumbling stone walls, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim what had once belonged to it. At the heart of this mystery was a girl named Eliza, who had vanished from the town without a trace. Legend spoke of her laughter echoing through the halls, of her spirit dancing through the shadows. Some claimed they could see her silhouette in the upstairs window on moonlit nights, her presence lingering like a whisper in the wind. But as time passed, the stories became obscured, lost among the clamor of life in the town, leaving only a lingering question. What had happened to Eliza? One autumn afternoon, curiosity piqued my interest, and I found myself standing before the old house. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. The sky overhead was painted in hues of orange and purple as the sun began to set, casting an ethereal glow around the house. With each step I took toward the entrance, my heart raced, a mix of excitement and apprehension filling my chest. I was determined to uncover the truth behind the stories that had haunted this place for so long. As I reached the front porch, I hesitated, taking in the sight of the weathered door, its paint chipped and peeling. I could feel a chill in the air, an unsettling sensation that prickled at the back of my neck. Summoning my courage, I reached for the doorknob, its surface cold against my palm. To my surprise, the door creaked open, revealing a darkened hallway beyond. The interior of the house was steeped in shadows, the faint light from the setting sun filtering through the dusty windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. As I stepped inside, the floorboards groaned beneath my weight, each sound echoing like a whisper from the past. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and forgotten memories, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on something sacred. I took a deep breath, pushing aside my apprehensions as I ventured further into the house. The walls were adorned with faded photographs, their subjects gazing out with solemn expressions, as if they were guardians of the secrets held within these walls. I ran my fingers along the surfaces, feeling the coolness of the frame beneath my touch, the faces frozen in time whispering their stories. As I explored the ground floor, I found remnants of the past scattered throughout the rooms. A broken chair, a cracked mirror, and a dusty piano in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. It was as if the house had been frozen in time, each object telling a story of the life that had once flourished within its walls. But it was the staircase that beckoned to me. Winding upward into darkness, it seemed to call my name, urging me to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden above. I hesitated at the foot of the stairs, the chill of the air wrapping around me like a shroud. Gathering my courage, I ascended the staircase, each step echoing in the silence. At the top of the stairs, I found a narrow hallway lined with doors. One door stood slightly ajar, the soft glow of light spilling out into the dim corridor. Intrigued, I approached cautiously, pushing the door open just enough to peek inside. What I found took my breath away. The room was filled with remnants of a girl's life. A canopy bed draped in delicate lace, a vanity adorned with trinkets and baubles, and walls painted in soft pastels. But it was the sight of an old diary resting on the bed that captured my attention. Its leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age, and I could feel the weight of countless secrets contained within. I stepped inside, heart racing, and picked up the diary, my fingers trembling as I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, each word imbued with emotion. As I read the words, I felt as if Eliza herself were speaking to me, recounting her hopes, dreams, and fears. The entries were filled with the joys of youth, the innocence of friendship, and the pangs of heartache. But as I continued to read, the tone shifted. The words became darker, filled with confusion and despair. "They say I'm different," one entry began, "that I see things that others cannot. I wish I could make them understand." A shiver ran down my spine as I realized that Eliza had been misunderstood, a girl trapped in a world that couldn't accept her uniqueness. The more I read, the more I felt a connection to her, as if our lives were intertwined despite the decades that separated us. Suddenly, I was jolted from my thoughts by the sound of footsteps echoing from below. Panic surged through me. Had someone else come to explore the old house? I quickly closed the diary, tucking it under my arm, and rushed to the window, heart pounding in my chest. I peered out into the growing darkness, my breath hitching as I saw a figure moving toward the house. A chill swept over me as I recognized the silhouette of a girl, dressed in white, her hair cascading down her back. The stories were true. Eliza's spirit lingered in this place. Instinctively, I stepped back, pressing my back against the wall as the girl reached the front door. She hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder as if sensing my presence. My heart raced, a mix of fear and fascination coursing through me. I wanted to call out to her, to ask her what had happened, but my voice failed me. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The girl pushed open the door and stepped inside, the air growing colder with her presence. She paused at the threshold, her eyes scanning the room, and for a brief moment, our gazes locked. There was a flicker of recognition in her expression, as if she could see me just as clearly as I could see her. Then, she turned and began to walk deeper into the house, her ethereal form gliding silently across the floor. I felt a compulsion to follow her, a need to understand what she wanted, what had drawn her back to this place. I hesitated for just a moment, then made my decision, clutching the diary tightly as I stepped out of the room. I crept down the hallway, my heart pounding as I followed her into the darkness. The shadows enveloped me, but I pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the girl who lived in the old house. Each step felt heavier, the weight of Eliza's past guiding me forward, as whispers of the past danced through the air around me. This was just the beginning of a journey that would reveal not only the secrets of the old house, but the untold story of a girl who had long been forgotten. The house held its breath, and I was ready to uncover its mysteries. As I descended the hallway, I felt an eerie calm enveloping me, an atmosphere thick with the weight of history and unspoken truths. The old Victorian house, with its creaking floorboards and faded wallpaper, seemed to breathe around me, each exhale echoing the stories of those who had once inhabited its rooms. The girl, Eliza, floated just beyond my reach, her presence both haunting and mesmerizing. I followed her into the dimly lit living room, where the shadows seemed to dance like phantoms. The furniture, covered in white sheets, stood as sentinels of the past, each piece preserving the memories of laughter and love that had once filled the space. A grand piano sat against the far wall, its keys glistening in the fading light, almost begging to be played. I hesitated, entranced by the sight, but my focus remained on Eliza, who was now standing in front of the fireplace, gazing into the ashes of a long-extinguished fire. "Eliza," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What happened to you?" She turned her head slightly, her long hair cascading like a waterfall of shadows. Her eyes, deep and haunting, held a world of sorrow, yet also a flicker of hope. She raised her hand as if to beckon me closer, and I felt an overwhelming urge to bridge the gap between our worlds. In that moment, I understood that the diary I had found held the key to her story. Perhaps it contained the answers to the questions swirling in my mind, the reason for her presence, the mystery of her disappearance. With renewed determination, I clutched the diary tighter, feeling its weight against my chest. Eliza began to move again, gliding through the room with an elegance that was both otherworldly and poignant. I followed closely, my heart racing with anticipation. She led me to the staircase I had climbed earlier, pausing at the bottom as if inviting me to join her. With a deep breath, I ascended the steps once more, my pulse quickening with every stride. At the top of the staircase, the air grew thicker, charged with an energy that sent shivers down my spine. Eliza turned to me, her expression a blend of longing and sadness. She gestured toward a door at the end of the hallway, the only one I hadn't yet explored. It stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me forward. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the room revealing itself in a cascade of shadows. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of old paper and ink, and I realized that this was a study, once filled with the energy of creativity and intellect. A large desk dominated the space, cluttered with books and papers, remnants of a life lived in pursuit of knowledge. My eyes were drawn to a tall bookshelf, its shelves sagging under the weight of countless volumes. I approached, running my fingers along the spines, feeling the texture of the leather covers beneath my touch. Titles like Dreams and Nightmares and The Secrets of the Soul caught my eye, and I couldn't help but wonder what had captivated Eliza's imagination. "Is this where you wrote?" I asked, glancing back at Eliza. Her gaze was fixed on the desk, and I could sense her yearning for a time when her thoughts and feelings could be captured on paper. I stepped closer to the desk, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the scattered pages. As I sifted through the papers, I discovered more entries from Eliza's diary, her handwriting flowing across the pages like a river of emotions. The entries were filled with reflections on her dreams, the friendships she cherished, and the struggles she faced as she tried to navigate a world that often felt cruel and unwelcoming. It was clear that she had been an imaginative soul, her thoughts wandering to places that others could not comprehend. But as I delved deeper into the pages, I found something that made my heart race. A series of entries detailing her encounters with a mysterious figure. The first mention was casual, a passing thought about a boy who had recently moved to town, someone who had captivated her attention. But as the entries progressed, the tone shifted. Her excitement turned to confusion, then fear. "The boy who came to the garden," one entry read. "He speaks of things I cannot understand, of shadows and secrets. I don't know if I can trust him." I looked up at Eliza, who was now standing beside me, her expression clouded with a mixture of sorrow and regret. I could see that she wanted me to understand the significance of this boy, the catalyst for the changes that had led to her tragic fate. My heart ached for her, for the girl who had been drawn into a world that ultimately became her prison. With every word I read, the picture of Eliza's life began to take shape, a portrait of a young girl struggling to find her place in a society that refused to accept her. I could feel the weight of her emotions pressing down on me, the burden of a heart that had longed for acceptance, yet found only isolation. The room seemed to grow colder as I pieced together her story. Eliza had been a girl filled with dreams, but those dreams had been shattered by the very people she had hoped would understand her. Her diary revealed her hopes for the future, the friendships she cherished, and the darkness that had crept into her life, obscuring the light. "Is this why you're here?" I asked softly, my voice trembling. "To show me what happened? To find peace?" Eliza nodded, her gaze penetrating mine, and I felt a surge of empathy wash over me. In that moment, I knew that I had to help her, to uncover the truth behind the boy who had entered her life and left a trail of sorrow in his wake. The air crackled with energy as I glanced back at the diary, my heart racing with determination. I needed to understand who this boy was and what secrets he had hidden from Eliza. The more I uncovered, the closer I would be to unraveling the mystery that bound her spirit to this house. As I continued to read, I stumbled upon a final entry that sent a chill through my bones. "He promised me the world," it began, but as the shadows grew longer, I realized that he was not who he seemed. "I fear for my life, for the darkness is closing in, and I cannot escape." The page was stained with tears, the ink running in places as if her emotions had spilled onto the paper. I felt a pang of anger surge within me. How could anyone have hurt her like this? How could they have taken away her light? I glanced up at Eliza, who looked as if she were fading, the ethereal glow around her dimming. I realized that time was running out, and I needed to act quickly if I was to help her find peace. My mind raced with questions. Where was this boy now? What had he done to her? Suddenly, a loud creak echoed through the house, pulling me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I turned toward the doorway, the feeling of being watched creeping over me once more. I sensed a presence, something lurking just beyond my line of sight. "Eliza," I called out, panic rising in my chest. "We need to hurry." But she remained silent, her gaze fixed on something in the distance, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. I felt a chill creep down my spine, the air thickening around us, as if the very walls of the house were closing in. I had to confront the darkness that loomed in the shadows, the malevolent force that had invaded Eliza's life and bound her to this world. With a deep breath, I resolved to uncover the truth, to confront whatever had taken her away from the world she had once known. I was determined to unearth the secrets that lay hidden within the walls of this old house, to bring light to the shadows that had long been forgotten. Together, we would face the unknown, unraveling the threads of her past until the truth emerged, illuminating the darkness that had clouded her spirit for far too long. The atmosphere in the study thickened as I glanced back at Eliza, who stood quietly, a mere silhouette against the dim light filtering through the dusty window. The urgency to act surged within me, mingling with the fear that whatever presence lurked in the shadows might soon reveal itself. The diary lay open on the desk, the words begging for attention, for understanding. "Eliza, we have to find out what happened next," I urged, my voice steadying despite the trepidation clawing at my insides. "Tell me what you remember about the boy, who he was, and how he became part of your life." Her expression softened, a flicker of recognition in her eyes as she stepped closer, the faint glow of her spirit illuminating the darkness around us. She nodded, the longing in her gaze conveying unspoken words. The girl was ready to share the most critical chapters of her story. As I searched for more entries in the diary, my fingers trembled slightly, and the air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy. Each page I turned revealed another layer of Eliza's life. Her friendships, her passions, her fears, all woven into a tapestry of unfulfilled dreams. But it was the mentions of the boy, Samuel, that gripped my attention the most. "Samuel," I murmured, feeling the name roll off my tongue as I flipped through the pages. "What did he mean to you?" Eliza's expression shifted, and the shadows deepened around her. I could almost hear the echoes of her past, the bittersweet memories flooding her mind. The first mention of Samuel appeared in an entry dated shortly after his arrival in the neighborhood. "He moved into the house next door last week," she wrote. "I saw him playing in the garden, his laughter carrying over the fence. He seems different, mysterious, like he holds secrets of his own. I want to know him, but I'm afraid." I could sense the hope that had filled Eliza's heart at that moment, the innocent yearning for connection. But as the entries progressed, the tone began to shift. The excitement morphed into confusion, the spark of joy dimming with each passing day. "Samuel is unlike anyone I've ever met," she penned in another entry. "He talks about things that make me uncomfortable, about shadows in the night and things that dwell in the dark. He says he can see them, that they whisper to him. I don't understand, but I can't help being drawn to him." Each line revealed the complexities of their relationship, a delicate dance of attraction and fear. As Eliza grew closer to Samuel, she became entangled in his world, a world filled with secrets that threatened to consume her. "The more I learn about him, the less I recognize the boy I thought I knew," she confessed in a later entry. "He talks of power and control, of being different from everyone else. Sometimes, I wonder if he sees me as a means to an end. I'm scared, but I can't walk away." My heart ached for her, realizing the isolation she must have felt as she grappled with her emotions. Samuel had entered her life like a whirlwind, charming and beguiling. But as the days turned into weeks, his true nature began to unfurl, revealing the darkness hidden beneath the surface. "Eliza," I called softly, seeking her gaze. "What happened next? Did you confront him about these feelings?" The shadows danced in her eyes, but she remained silent, the weight of her past pressing heavily upon her. I continued to read, desperate to piece together the fragments of her story, to understand the force that had driven a wedge between her and the boy she had once cherished. "The night the shadows came for me," she wrote, her handwriting growing frantic. "It was after I invited Samuel into my home. He brought something with him, a darkness that clung to him like a second skin. I could feel it, like cold fingers wrapped around my heart, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I felt my heart racing, the tension in the room palpable as I absorbed her words. "What did he do to you?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "Samuel promised me the world," she continued, "but instead, he opened a door to nightmares. I saw things I can't unsee, figures lurking in the corners, shadows whispering secrets meant to remain buried. He was the key, but also the lock, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape. I paused, processing the implications of her revelations. Samuel had not just been a boy who captured her heart. He had been a harbinger of darkness, a catalyst for the tragedy that had befallen her. "Did you try to get away?" I asked urgently. "Did you confront him?" She nodded slowly, the sorrow in her eyes deepening. "I tried to escape the grip of his influence, to pull away from the shadows that wrapped around me. But every time I tried, he would find a way back into my life, pulling me deeper into his world. It was as if he could sense my fear, feeding off it, growing stronger as I weakened." My heart ached for Eliza as I read through her increasingly desperate entries. I could feel her despair emanating from the pages, a testament to the struggles she had endured. Each word echoed with the weight of unfulfilled potential, the dreams she had once held now reduced to ashes. Then, I stumbled upon a chilling entry that sent a shiver down my spine. "He promised he could protect me from the shadows," she wrote, "but I fear he has become one of them. I can no longer tell what is real and what is not. I need to break free." I looked up at her, realizing the depth of her turmoil. "Eliza, we have to confront him," I said, a fire igniting within me. "You deserve closure, a chance to reclaim your life. We can't let him keep you in this cycle of fear." But as I spoke, the room grew darker, and the atmosphere shifted. The shadows seemed to come alive, swirling around us, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. I could sense a presence, a force that sought to protect its secrets at all costs. "Eliza," I shouted, panic rising within me. "We need to leave this room." But it was too late. The air crackled with energy, and I felt a surge of power enveloping us, pushing us back toward the desk. The diary began to flutter wildly, as if possessed, the pages turning rapidly until one stopped on a chilling entry. "The shadows are closing in," it read. "I can feel them. I can't breathe. Samuel has betrayed me. He is no longer the boy I loved. He is something else. I must fight to survive." In that moment, the shadows coalesced into a swirling mass, a dark figure taking shape just beyond our vision. The air grew heavy, thick with the malevolence that had haunted Eliza for so long. "Stay close to me," I shouted, fear coursing through my veins as I took a step back, positioning myself between Eliza and the encroaching darkness. "We can face this together." But as the figure advanced, I realized we were not just battling Eliza's past. We were confronting the very essence of the darkness that had claimed her life. My heart raced as the shadows whispered promises of despair and defeat. "Fight it, Eliza," I urged, turning to her. "Remember who you are. You are stronger than this." Her gaze met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw the flicker of hope in her eyes. "I will not be a prisoner anymore," she declared, her voice rising above the chaos. I refused to let the shadows define me. Together, we stood our ground, the light of her spirit pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I felt an energy surge between us, a connection that transcended the barriers of life and death. In that moment, I knew we could overcome whatever darkness sought to claim her. The shadows screamed in protest, the figure contorting and twisting, attempting to weave its way into our minds. But as Eliza and I faced it together, our determination solidified the barrier between us and the malevolence. With a roar, I reached for the diary, raising it high as if it were a shield. "We will tell your story," I cried out, my voice strong and unwavering. "We will expose the darkness and reclaim your light." The shadows writhed and howled, but with each word I spoke, their power weakened. Eliza stepped forward, her spirit glowing brighter than ever. "You have no hold over me," she proclaimed, her voice fierce and resolute. As the darkness began to dissipate, I could feel a shift in the atmosphere. The shadows retreated, their cries echoing in the distance as the room flooded with light. We had faced the unknown together, unraveling the secrets that had bound Eliza to this house. And as the remnants of the darkness faded away, I knew we had taken the first step toward her freedom. The remnants of the dark figure faded into the corners of the room, leaving behind a faint trace of despair that clung to the air. Eliza stood beside me, her spirit shimmering brighter than ever, illuminating the shadows that had once claimed her. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically, the oppressive weight lifting as if a long-forgotten light had returned to the world. Yet, as the last echoes of the darkness dissipated, a sense of foreboding settled in my chest. We had confronted the shadows, but the battle was not yet over. The diary lay open on the desk, its pages whispering secrets we had yet to uncover. The final chapters held the key to Eliza's liberation, and I felt a surge of urgency coursing through me. "Let's continue," I said, determination fueling my voice. "There's still more to uncover about Samuel and what he did to you." Eliza nodded, her expression resolute. Together, we leaned over the diary, and I began to read aloud, my heart racing as I delved into the next entries. The nights grew darker, and I could feel Samuel's presence even when he was not there, Eliza's writing revealed. He began to appear in my dreams, his voice a seductive whisper luring me deeper into his world. "Embrace the shadows, Eliza," he would say. "They will grant you power." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I felt the danger that lurked beneath his charm. The words unfolded before us like a tapestry, revealing the tumultuous journey Eliza had endured. The deeper we delved, the more I understood the gravity of her plight. Samuel's allure had transformed into a sinister force, manipulating her thoughts and emotions, leading her down a path fraught with peril. The day I finally confronted him was the day everything changed, Eliza wrote, her voice trembling as I read. I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered my courage and went to his house, determined to unmask the boy I once loved. I had to know what he truly wanted from me. I could feel the tension building within her as she recounted the fateful meeting. The diary described the moment when she had knocked on Samuel's door, her heart pounding in her chest. When he opened the door, his smile sent chills down my spine, she wrote. He looked the same, yet something felt fundamentally different. There was an intensity in his eyes, a darkness that seemed to draw me in. "Eliza," he said, his voice smooth and enchanting. "I've been waiting for you." I paused, looking at Eliza. "What did you say to him?" "I demanded to know the truth," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I needed to understand what he had done to me, to us." But as I confronted him, the shadows began to swirl around us. It was as if they were reacting to my words, hungry for the chaos that ensued. I continued reading, captivated by the unfolding drama. I tried to remain strong, but Samuel's words cut deep. "You're afraid of your own power, Eliza," he sneered. "You could be so much more if you just let go of your fears and embrace the darkness within you." The pages turned rapidly as I absorbed her anguish. The shadows seemed to twist and writhe at his command, wrapping around me like a suffocating embrace. I could feel their coldness seeping into my bones, pulling me into the depths of despair. "Did he try to convince you to join him?" I asked, my heart racing with anticipation. Eliza nodded, her expression growing more intense. "He painted a picture of a world where I could wield incredible power, a world free of fear and limitations." For a moment, I almost believed him, but deep down, I could sense that this power came at a cost, a price I was not willing to pay. As I read the next entry, a sense of urgency gripped me. In that moment of vulnerability, I felt a spark of defiance ignite within me. Eliza's words proclaimed. I pushed back against the shadows, declaring that I would not be a pawn in his game. The darkness recoiled, and I could see the surprise in Samuel's eyes. "That's when it happened," she continued. "The shadows turned against him. I had become a conduit for light, a force strong enough to repel the darkness he had summoned. In that moment of realization, I saw his true self, a boy consumed by his own darkness, unable to accept the light that dwelled within others." The atmosphere in the study shifted as Eliza's words filled the air with a renewed energy. I could feel the tension rising, the remnants of the darkness quivering as they realized their grip was slipping. "We have to confront him, Eliza," I urged, my voice steadying. "We can't allow him to continue haunting you. We need to find a way to free you from his hold once and for all." She nodded, determination etched across her features. "I'm ready, but we need to be prepared. Samuel won't go down without a fight." As we turned to the final entries in the diary, The atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. Eliza's words revealed the true extent of Samuel's manipulation, a web of deceit and darkness that had entangled her life for far too long. The final confrontation was unlike anything I had ever experienced, she wrote. The shadows raged as I declared my intention to break free from Samuel's grasp. I could feel the power within me surging, the light pushing against the darkness that threatened to consume us both. I could sense the intensity building, the air thick with tension as I continued reading. As I stood before him, I felt the shadows clawing at my mind, whispering promises of power and fear. But I remembered who I was, a girl who had once dared to dream, who refused to let darkness define her. With every ounce of strength, I declared, "I am not afraid of you, Samuel." As I read those words, a wave of empowerment washed over me. The room shimmered with energy, the light of Eliza's spirit pushing back against the shadows that had once dominated her life. I could see the fear in his eyes, she continued, her voice growing stronger. The shadows recoiled, and for the first time, I felt the balance shift. I was not merely a victim. I was a warrior fighting for my own freedom. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, and I felt the energy surging between us. Eliza had found her strength, and together, we would confront the darkness that had plagued her life for so long. "I cannot allow you to take my light," she shouted, her voice resonating with power. "I will no longer be your puppet, Samuel." As the final confrontation unfolded in the pages of the diary, I could almost hear the echoes of the battle ringing in the air. The shadows writhed and screamed, but Eliza stood firm, the light radiating from her spirit, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. And just as the diary closed on the final chapter, I knew we had reached the climax of Eliza's story, a moment where she would reclaim her life and break free from the chains that had bound her for far too long. The confrontation had reached its peak, and the air crackled with an intensity that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Eliza stood tall, her spirit ablaze with defiance, casting a radiant light that pierced through the shadows, illuminating the dark corners of the room. I could feel the weight of her determination, a palpable force that surged around us as the shadows writhed in desperation. "Your time is over, Samuel," she declared, her voice echoing with conviction. "I will no longer let fear dictate my life. I am reclaiming my power." The shadows shrieked in protest, swirling violently around us, but Eliza stood resolute. Her luminous aura shimmered, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I felt the energy pulsing through me as I witnessed her transformation. A girl who had once been consumed by fear now stood as a fierce warrior, ready to face the darkness head-on. As Samuel's figure materialized amidst the chaos, his expression morphed from surprise to rage. "You think you can defeat me, Eliza?" he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "You are nothing without me. I made you who you are." A wave of anger surged through me at his words. The manipulation he had wielded over her now laid bare. "No, Samuel," I interjected, stepping closer to Eliza's side. "She has found her strength, and you cannot control her anymore. Your power comes from fear, and we refuse to live in fear any longer." Eliza nodded, her confidence radiating outward. "You've taken enough from me, Samuel. You've stolen my joy, my dreams, and my peace. But now, it's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." The shadows howled in fury, their once vibrant forms darkening as they began to disintegrate under the intensity of Eliza's light. I could see the realization dawning in Samuel's eyes, the realization that he was losing control. "No," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "You belong to me. You cannot escape this." But Eliza, empowered by her newfound strength, raised her hands, and the light surrounding her intensified. "I am no longer your possession," she declared. "I am free, and I will break this cycle of darkness." With a surge of energy, Eliza unleashed a brilliant burst of light that erupted from her core, enveloping the room in a blinding brilliance. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in agony as the light consumed them, unraveling the darkness that had held them captive for so long. "Together," I shouted, the urgency in my voice piercing through the chaos. Let's do this together. Eliza nodded, and as we joined forces, a wave of radiant energy surged between us. The power of our combined spirits pushed back the darkness, filling the room with a warmth that dispelled the fear lingering in the corners. Samuel's expression shifted from anger to sheer terror as he realized that the very power he had sought to control was now turning against him. "No, this isn't how it's supposed to end," he screamed, his form flickering as the shadows clung to him, desperately trying to maintain their hold. But it was too late. Eliza's light enveloped him, shining brighter than the darkest shadows he had summoned. "This is where your power ends, Samuel. You will no longer haunt me or anyone else. It's time for you to face the truth of your actions." With one final push, the light erupted, consuming the darkness entirely. The shadows dissipated like mist in the morning sun, leaving behind only the faint echoes of their presence. Samuel's figure melted away, swallowed by the light, and in that moment, I could feel the shift. The balance had been restored. As the last remnants of darkness faded, a profound silence enveloped us. Eliza stood before me, her spirit radiating with an ethereal glow, a reflection of her newfound freedom. Tears of relief streamed down her face, mingling with the remnants of her past struggles. "It's finally over," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm free." I stepped forward, wrapping my arms around her in a tight embrace. "You did it, Eliza. You confronted your fears, faced your darkness, and emerged victorious." As we stood there, the weight of the past lifted from her shoulders. I felt a sense of closure wash over us both. The battle was won, and Eliza was no longer a prisoner of her own fears. But even in this moment of triumph, I knew our journey was far from over. The diary lay open on the desk, its pages still whispering secrets of the past. There was so much more to uncover, and the path ahead would require both of us to continue growing, learning, and healing. "Thank you for standing by me," Eliza said, her voice steadying. "I couldn't have done this without you." I smiled, grateful for the bond we had forged through this harrowing journey. "We're in this together. Your strength inspired me, and together, we will face whatever comes next." As we stepped away from the remnants of the confrontation, I couldn't help but feel the energy shift in the room. The air was lighter, filled with the promise of hope and renewal. The darkness that had once clung to Eliza now transformed into a beacon of strength, guiding us toward a future filled with possibilities. "Let's close the diary," I suggested, glancing at the pages that had chronicled Eliza's struggles. "It's time to put the past behind us and embrace what lies ahead." She nodded, a determined smile spreading across her face. Together, we gently closed the diary, sealing away the darkness that had once threatened to consume her. As we stood in the quiet of the study, I felt a sense of purpose blossoming within me. We had conquered the shadows, but there would always be challenges to face and new paths to explore. Eliza was no longer the girl who lived in the old house. She was a warrior, ready to embrace the world with open arms. With newfound clarity, I turned to her. "Let's step outside. The world is waiting for us, and I have a feeling it's going to be incredible." Eliza smiled brightly, her spirit shining with unyielding strength. "Yes, let's go." As we walked out of the study, the door creaking open to reveal a world bathed in sunlight, I knew that this was just the beginning. Together, we would explore the mysteries that awaited us, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage, strength, and the unbreakable bond we had forged in the depths of darkness. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the sprawling fields of grass that bordered the small town of Eldridge. An eerie stillness settled over the landscape, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. For years, Eldridge had been a place where tales of the past lingered, often spoken of in hushed tones and wary glances. Among these tales, one particular story had captured the imagination of the townsfolk, a story about an unmarked grave that lay hidden deep within the woods. Lila Hart, a spirited young woman with an insatiable curiosity, stood at the edge of those very woods, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had grown up hearing the whispered legends about the grave, tales that suggested it belonged to someone important, someone whose identity had been lost to time. Lila had always been drawn to the unknown, and as she stared into the dense thicket of trees, she felt an unshakable urge to uncover the truth. As a child, Lila often played near the woods, her imagination ignited by the stories that swirled around the town. The unmarked grave was a source of both fear and fascination. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the restless spirit of its occupant. Many warned her to stay away, recounting eerie experiences they had while venturing too close to the site. But for Lila, those warnings only fueled her determination. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, pushing aside the overgrown branches that seemed to guard the entrance to the forest. The air grew cooler as she ventured deeper into the woods, and the light from the setting sun faded, casting a more ominous shadow over her path. Lila clutched her flashlight tightly, the beam cutting through the encroaching darkness as she navigated the winding trails. The deeper she walked, the more she felt the weight of history pressing upon her. Twisted roots snaked along the ground, and the sound of distant rustling seemed to echo around her. With every step, Lila could feel a tingling sensation creeping up her spine, as if the forest itself were alive and aware of her presence. After what felt like an eternity of wandering, Lila finally stumbled upon a clearing, and her breath caught in her throat. There it was, a patch of disturbed earth, slightly raised, surrounded by wildflowers that swayed gently in the cool evening breeze. The absence of a headstone sent a chill through her, but the palpable energy that surrounded the site was undeniable. This was the unmarked grave that had haunted Eldridge for generations. Kneeling beside the grave, Lila traced her fingers along the edge of the earth, feeling a connection to the past that both thrilled and terrified her. What secrets lay buried here? Who had been interred in this lonely plot, forgotten by time, yet remembered by whispers? A mix of dread and excitement coursed through her veins as she pondered the stories that could lie within this resting place. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Lila turned her head, scanning the tree line surrounding the clearing. There was something there, lurking just beyond the shadows, a figure, indistinct and shrouded in darkness. Lila's heart raced as the figure seemed to hover, almost as if it were watching her. Was it a trick of the light, or had she unknowingly disturbed something that was meant to remain undisturbed? "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing in the silence. "Is anyone there?" The figure shifted, and Lila felt a surge of adrenaline. She rose to her feet, her flashlight beam trembling in her grasp. "Show yourself," she demanded, her curiosity now entwined with fear. The figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. It was a woman, ethereal and translucent, her long hair flowing like smoke. The spirit's eyes locked onto Lila's, and a jolt of recognition struck her. She had seen this woman before. Portraits hung in the town's library had depicted her likeness, a woman lost to history, her story buried along with her grave. "What do you seek?" the spirit asked, her voice a haunting melody that reverberated through the clearing. "Why have you come to this sacred place?" Lila's mind raced, struggling to articulate her thoughts. "I'm here to uncover the truth," she finally managed. "I want to know who you are and why you've been forgotten." The spirit regarded her with a mixture of sorrow and longing. "My name is Isadora. I was once a part of this town, a life woven into its tapestry. But my story was lost, and my grave unmarked. I linger here, seeking justice for the wrongs that were done to me." Lila felt a surge of empathy, her heart aching for the spirit. "What happened to you, Isadora?" A faint breeze rustled the trees, and Isadora's expression turned solemn. "I was betrayed by those I loved, cast aside as if my life held no value. I died in obscurity, and the truth of my existence has faded into whispers and rumors." Lila felt a deep sense of responsibility wash over her. "I'll help you," she vowed. "I'll uncover your story, and I won't let you be forgotten." The spirit's eyes glistened with gratitude. "Thank you, brave one. Together, we can bring light to the darkness that surrounds my grave. But be warned, the path ahead is fraught with danger, and the truth may not be as you expect." As Lila stood before the spirit, a bond formed between them, a shared purpose that transcended the boundaries of life and death. She had ventured into the woods seeking adventure, but now she found herself on a quest to restore Isadora's legacy. Little did she know that the journey ahead would challenge her beliefs, force her to confront the darkness of the past, and uncover a terrifying truth that had long been buried alongside the unmarked grave. With a renewed sense of purpose, Lila took a step back from the grave, her mind racing with thoughts of Isadora and the secrets buried beneath the surface. She had come seeking a story, but now she found herself entwined in a mystery far deeper than she had anticipated. The weight of the spirit's plea echoed in her heart as she resolved to uncover the truth of Isadora's life and the events that led to her untimely death. As Lila turned to leave the clearing, she glanced back at Isadora, who remained anchored to the grave, her ethereal form shimmering in the moonlight. "Where should I start?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Seek the library," Isadora replied, her voice like a gentle breeze. "There lies the history of our town, the accounts of those who came before. But tread carefully. Not all who walk these streets are at peace." The mention of the library sparked a flicker of excitement within Lila. It had always been her favorite place in Eldridge, a sanctuary of stories and knowledge. The thought of diving into the dusty archives, of unearthing the remnants of Isadora's past, sent her heart racing. She nodded determinedly. "I'll go there first thing in the morning." With a lingering glance at the spirit, Lila made her way back through the woods, her flashlight illuminating the twisting path ahead. The air was thick with anticipation, and every rustle of leaves seemed to whisper secrets of the past. As she stepped into the cool night, the sense of adventure enveloped her, pushing her forward toward the library and the mysteries that awaited. The following morning, Lila arrived at the Eldridge Public Library, its grand facade standing proudly against the backdrop of a clear blue sky. The scent of aged paper and leather greeted her as she entered, and she felt a familiar comfort wash over her. Rows of books lined the shelves, each containing a world of stories waiting to be uncovered. She made her way to the local history section, her fingers grazing the spines of the books as she searched for any mention of Isadora or the unmarked grave. After hours of sifting through records, Lila found herself engrossed in a dusty ledger that chronicled the lives of Eldridge's residents over the decades. Then, amidst the yellowed pages, she found it, a mention of Isadora Sterling, a name that struck a chord in her memory. According to the ledger, Isadora had been a vibrant member of the community in the late 1800s, known for her beauty and kindness. The records hinted at a life full of promise, but as Lila delved deeper, the tone shifted dramatically. Isadora's story took a dark turn as Lila read of a scandal that had rocked the town. Rumors swirled about a forbidden love affair, whispers of betrayal, and ultimately, accusations that led to Isadora's social ostracism. As Lila pieced together the fragments of Isadora's life, she felt a deepening sense of sorrow. This was a woman whose spirit had been crushed by the very people she had trusted. Determined to uncover more, Lila scoured through old newspapers, each article revealing a layer of complexity to Isadora's tale. It became clear that her love affair had been with a local man of significant standing, a marriage proposal that had been snuffed out by the society of the time. The scandal had branded Isadora, and she had become a target for the town's judgment. But the deeper Lila dug, the more questions arose. Who had betrayed Isadora so thoroughly? And how had she died? The ledger only hinted at her tragic fate, leaving a void where the truth should lie. Lila felt a gnawing sense of urgency. She had to uncover what had happened to Isadora, not only for the spirit but for herself. After hours of research, Lila found herself at the library's archives, where she uncovered old photographs and records of town meetings. It was here she stumbled upon a document that caught her eye, a list of attendees for a town meeting held shortly after Isadora's death. The names included many prominent figures in Eldridge, including the man Isadora had once loved and his family, who had stood to gain much from her demise. As Lila read the names, she felt a chill wash over her. The implications were staggering. Had the man Isadora loved been involved in her death? The thought rattled her, and she quickly scanned the notes for any further details. Suddenly, a familiar name leaped out at her: Agatha Holloway. Lila recalled hearing that name mentioned in town, a woman known for her sharp tongue and unyielding judgment. Determined to learn more about Agatha, Lila searched through the archives for any mention of her. What she found was both shocking and intriguing. Agatha had been a close friend of Isadora, but the relationship had soured after the scandal broke. Lila's heart raced at the thought that perhaps Agatha held answers to the questions haunting her. As she prepared to leave the library, Lila felt a strange sensation wash over her, as if someone was watching her. She turned, expecting to see a fellow patron, but the aisles were empty. Shaking off the feeling, she left the building, clutching her findings tightly. Once home, Lila pulled out her notebook, jotting down everything she had discovered. The pieces were slowly falling into place, but the picture remained incomplete. She needed to confront Agatha, to unravel the truth behind the whispers that had haunted Isadora's memory. The following day, Lila set out for Agatha's house, an old Victorian that stood at the edge of town, its once vibrant paint now peeling and faded. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. After a moment, the door creaked open to reveal Agatha, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes sharp and assessing. "What do you want?" Agatha's voice was cool, her gaze unwavering. "I'm Lila Hart," she introduced herself. "I'm researching Isadora Sterling, and I believe you knew her." The mention of Isadora's name caused a flicker of emotion in Agatha's eyes, but it was quickly masked by indifference. "That was a long time ago," she replied curtly. "I believe you have answers," Lila pressed, feeling the weight of Isadora's spirit behind her. "She deserves to have her story told, and I want to know the truth about what happened to her." Agatha hesitated, a wariness crossing her features. "You don't know what you're getting into, girl," she warned. "Some stories are better left buried." "Isadora is still here," Lila insisted, her voice rising. "I've seen her spirit. She's looking for justice, and I'm determined to help her." Agatha studied Lila for a moment, the tension palpable. Finally, with a resigned sigh, she stepped aside. "Come in, but be prepared. The truth can be a heavy burden to bear." As Lila entered the house, she felt the weight of history in the air, the past looming like a shadow over them. With each step deeper into Agatha's home, she sensed the unraveling of a story that had been hidden for far too long. The search for Isadora's truth was only just beginning, and Lila was ready to confront whatever darkness lay ahead. Stepping into Agatha Holloway's dimly lit living room felt like crossing a threshold into a different era. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and something unplaceable that made Lila's heart race. As she looked around, her gaze landed on faded photographs lining the walls. Pictures of people long gone, their faces frozen in time. It was a haunting gallery, each image a silent witness to the stories that had unfolded within these walls. Agatha gestured for Lila to sit in an old, well-worn armchair, its fabric threadbare and soft. She took a seat across from her, and for a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken memories and the weight of unresolved history. "I want to know what really happened to Isadora," Lila finally said, breaking the tension. "The records say she was ostracized after a scandal, but there's so much more to her story. You were her friend. Surely you know what led to her downfall." Agatha's expression darkened, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Isadora was a beautiful girl, full of life and dreams. "But dreams can quickly turn into nightmares in a place like Eldridge," she began, her voice steady but tinged with bitterness. "She fell in love with someone she shouldn't have, someone who was already promised to another." Lila leaned forward, captivated. "Who was it? Was it the man she loved?" "Jonathan Blackwood," Agatha replied, her tone heavy with disdain. "He was charming, charismatic, and a man of means. His family was well respected in the community, and Isadora believed he was her ticket to a different life. But the moment his betrothed found out, all hell broke loose." "What happened next?" Lila pressed, her mind racing as she tried to connect the dots. "Jonathan's fiancée, Madeline, was ruthless," Agatha continued, her voice rising slightly with anger. "She used her family's influence to turn the town against Isadora. They called her a harlot, a homewrecker. It was horrible. She lost everything. Her friends, her reputation, even her family turned their backs on her. The pain in Agatha's eyes was unmistakable, a reflection of her own regret for not standing by Isadora during those dark days. I didn't have the courage to defend her when she needed me most, Agatha confessed, her voice cracking slightly. I was scared of losing my place in society. I didn't know how far things would go. What do you mean? Lila asked, sensing that Agatha was holding back. People started disappearing, Agatha whispered, her eyes darting around the room as if the shadows held ears. First, it was Isadora's family. Her father lost his job. Her mother fell ill. Then it was her. One night, she simply vanished. No one talked about it. They just buried it. It was like she never existed. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. Do you think Jonathan had something to do with it? What about Madeline? Agatha shook her head. Jonathan loved Isadora. He did. But love can turn dark, especially when a family's honor is at stake. I don't know what happened that night, but I believe he tried to save her. That's why I never approached him after everything went down. What about Madeline? What did she do after Isadora disappeared? Lila pressed, her curiosity piqued. Madeline claimed Isadora had run off, that she was ashamed. She made it seem as if Isadora had chosen to leave the town behind, that she was somehow the villain in her own story, Agatha said bitterly. But I know better. I've lived with that guilt for years. Lila could feel the weight of Agatha's sorrow and regret. We have to find out the truth, she urged. Isadora deserves that much. If she was wronged, we owe it to her to bring her story to light. Agatha studied Lila for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. Isadora deserves justice, even if it's too late for her. With a newfound determination, Agatha led Lila to a back room filled with boxes, dust-covered and forgotten. These are old records from the town, letters, diaries, anything that might shed light on what happened, she explained. But be careful, some of it may be painful. As they rummaged through the boxes, Lila felt as if she were digging into a buried treasure trove of history. The more they uncovered, the clearer the past became. They found letters written by Isadora to Jonathan, filled with dreams of a future together and desperate pleas for him to stand by her. But as they read through the letters, Lila's heart sank. The tone shifted dramatically from hope to despair. Isadora's last few letters hinted at her growing isolation and fear. They're watching me, one letter said. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. What did she mean? Lila asked, her voice trembling with apprehension. Agatha swallowed hard, her face pale. The townspeople had turned against her. I think she felt trapped. Whatever happened that night, it was more than just a love affair gone wrong. The realization settled over them like a heavy fog. Lila knew they needed more than letters. They needed to uncover the truth of that night. We have to speak to Jonathan, she declared, her resolve hardening. He might know what really happened to her. Agatha hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. He's reclusive now, living on the outskirts of town. After everything that happened, he distanced himself from Eldridge. But if we want answers, he's our best chance, Lila insisted, her heart racing at the thought of finally confronting the man who might hold the key to Isadora's fate. After a moment of silence, Agatha nodded. I'll go with you, she said, her voice steady. If there's any chance to right the wrongs of the past, we must take it. As they left Agatha's house, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the streets of Eldridge. Lila felt a sense of urgency building within her. The weight of Isadora's unresolved fate pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. They were not just seeking answers. They were on a mission to honor a life cut short, a life that still lingered in the shadows of the town. Driving toward Jonathan's home, Lila glanced at Agatha, who sat tense in the passenger seat, her hands clenched in her lap. Are you okay? Lila asked, concerned. I'll be fine, Agatha replied, though her voice lacked conviction. This is long overdue. As they arrived at Jonathan's property, an old Victorian home nestled among overgrown trees, Lila felt her pulse quicken. It stood eerily quiet, shrouded in an aura of mystery. Taking a deep breath, they stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel beneath their feet echoing in the stillness. Knocking on the door felt like striking a match in a dark room, illuminating secrets that had long been hidden. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing Jonathan. His eyes widened in surprise, and Lila felt a jolt of recognition. The same handsome features that had captivated Isadora, now etched with lines of age and sorrow. "Agatha? Lila Hart?" he asked, his voice shaky. "What brings you here?" "We need to talk about Isadora," Lila said, her voice firm. "You owe it to her memory." Jonathan's expression shifted from surprise to guardedness. "I have nothing to say about that," he replied, his voice a mix of pain and anger. "Please, just listen," Lila urged, stepping closer. "Isadora's story has been buried for too long. We're trying to find out what really happened." Agatha spoke up, her tone unwavering. "She deserves justice, Jonathan. We know you loved her. Help us honor her memory." Jonathan's defenses crumbled for a moment, and Lila saw the flicker of grief in his eyes. "I wanted to protect her," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I was too late." As the three of them stood there in the fading light, Lila realized they were standing at the precipice of a revelation that could change everything. The echoes of Isadora's past loomed large, and the truth was finally within reach. The air inside Jonathan's home felt heavy, thick with the weight of years spent in silence. Shadows danced across the walls as Lila, Agatha, and Jonathan moved to a small sitting room, its decor reflecting a time long past, a time that echoed with memories of love, loss, and secrets. The flickering light of an old lamp created a soft glow, illuminating Jonathan's face, which was etched with sorrow and regret. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Lila pressed, the urgency in her voice palpable. "You could have saved her from everything that happened." Jonathan shifted in his seat, his expression shifting from anger to anguish. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "When Isadora disappeared, I was devastated. I searched everywhere for her, but the town had turned against me. They blamed me for what happened, and I didn't know how to defend myself. I thought if I stayed away, maybe they'd let her memory rest in peace." Agatha interjected, her voice steady yet filled with compassion. "You were in love with her. You should have fought harder, Jonathan. You could have helped her." Jonathan's eyes filled with unshed tears. "I loved Isadora more than I could ever express, but I was powerless against the storm that swept through Eldridge. Madeline had the town in her grip. She convinced everyone that Isadora was the villain. I was afraid of losing my family's name, my future, and I was terrified that Madeline would destroy Isadora if I stood up for her." "Madeline," Lila echoed, trying to piece together the puzzle. "What happened to her after Isadora disappeared?" "Madeline married, moved away, and I haven't heard from her since," Jonathan replied. "But I always wondered if she had a hand in Isadora's disappearance. I just didn't have any proof." "Do you think she could have harmed Isadora?" Agatha asked, leaning forward. "It's possible she wanted to eliminate the competition." "I don't want to believe that," Jonathan admitted, anguish flickering across his face. "But I know Madeline's heart. She was consumed by jealousy. The last time I saw Isadora, she was terrified. She told me she felt like someone was watching her. She was scared of what Madeline would do." A shiver ran down Lila's spine as she absorbed Jonathan's words. The town had turned into a crucible of betrayal and fear. "We have to find out what really happened that night," she insisted. "Do you remember anything specific? Any details that might help us?" Jonathan rubbed his forehead, deep in thought. "There was a storm that night," he recalled slowly, his brow furrowing. "A really bad one. I was supposed to meet Isadora, but the rain was pouring down so hard that I couldn't see a thing. I thought she would come to me, but she never showed up." "Did you go looking for her?" Lila asked, her heart pounding. "I tried," he replied, his voice breaking. "But the streets were flooded, and I lost my way. I remember calling out her name, but it was like the storm swallowed my voice. I never found her, and when the rain stopped, everyone said she'd run away. But I knew better. I felt in my gut something terrible had happened." "Where did you last see her?" Agatha urged, desperate for a lead. "Near the old oak tree at the edge of town," Jonathan said, his voice barely a whisper. "It was a place we often met. I remember the last thing she said to me. If I'm not safe here, I don't know where I'll go." The weight of his words hung heavily in the room. Lila felt the pieces coming together, but knew they needed more than just memories. "We have to go back there," she said firmly. "We need to search for clues, anything that could tell us what happened." Jonathan hesitated, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. "You don't know what you're asking. That tree has always been a place of sorrow for me. It's where everything went wrong. But it's also where the truth might be hidden," Lila countered, her determination unwavering. "Isadora deserves that. You owe it to her." With a heavy sigh, Jonathan nodded, surrendering to the inevitability of their quest. "Okay, let's go." As they stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange hue over the horizon. The atmosphere felt electric, charged with the promise of revelation and the weight of history. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a storm, both literally and metaphorically. Arriving at the old oak tree, Lila's heart raced. It stood tall and solitary, its branches stretching out like skeletal fingers against the twilight sky. The ground was damp, the earth still soft from the recent rain. She approached the tree cautiously, the sense of foreboding thickening around them. "Is this where you last saw her?" Agatha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Jonathan replied, his gaze fixed on the trunk, as if he could see the past unfold before him. "I wish I could go back and change everything." Lila knelt down, brushing her fingers over the ground. "There must be something here," she murmured, searching for any sign of Isadora's presence. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. Digging into the earth, she unearthed a small locket, a delicate, ornate piece that glimmered in the fading light. "Look at this," Lila said, holding it up for the others to see. Inside the locket was a faded photograph of Isadora and Jonathan, their faces bright and filled with hope. It was a stark contrast to the darkness that had engulfed their lives. "Where did you find that?" Jonathan asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "It was buried here," Lila replied, her heart racing. "It must have fallen from Isadora's neck that night. This is a piece of her, something that proves she was here." As Jonathan took the locket from Lila, his hands trembled. "I remember this," he said, his voice cracking. "I gave it to her. It was our promise to always find each other." "What does it mean?" Agatha asked, her brow furrowed in thought. "It means Isadora was here, but it also means there's a connection to the past that we need to explore," Lila said, her mind racing with possibilities. "If she was here, she may have left us other clues. We need to keep searching." With renewed determination, they combed the area around the oak tree, digging through the earth, hoping to unearth more fragments of Isadora's story. As the darkness deepened, they uncovered small trinkets, a hairpin, a torn piece of fabric, and finally, a small notebook, its pages weathered and fragile. Lila held the notebook delicately, her heart pounding with anticipation. This could be it. This might be Isadora's journal. Opening it slowly, she began to read the entries aloud, her voice echoing in the stillness of the night. September 15th, 1892. "I feel trapped. I see the shadows closing in. Madeline watches me. I can feel her eyes on my back. I don't know who to trust anymore." Agatha gasped, and Jonathan's face paled. "She knew something," Jonathan said, his voice hoarse. "She knew she was in danger." The entries continued, chronicling Isadora's descent into isolation and despair. September 20th, 1892. "I met with Jonathan today. He promised he would find a way for us to be together. But I fear it may be too late." Lila's throat tightened as she read the last entry. September 22nd, 1892. "I'm scared. I think they're planning something. I can hear them whispering at night. I feel like I'm being hunted." Tears filled Agatha's eyes, and Lila felt the weight of Isadora's fear and pain enveloping her. "We have to honor her memory," Lila declared, her voice steady. "We need to uncover the truth about what happened to her." As they stood together beneath the old oak tree, the darkness seemed to pulse around them, filled with echoes of the past and the promise of revelations yet to come. They were no longer just three people seeking answers. They were the voices of the forgotten, the bearers of Isadora's truth. As the first light of dawn broke through the darkness, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lila, Agatha, and Jonathan stood together beneath the old oak tree, the weight of Isadora's story heavy in the air. The notebook lay open in Lila's hands, its pages filled with the haunting truths of the past, leading them deeper into a mystery that had remained unsolved for far too long. We can't let Isadora's story end here, Lila declared, determination coursing through her veins. We need to confront the shadows that still haunt Eldridge. It's the only way to bring her peace. Jonathan nodded, his expression a mix of sorrow and resolve. But how do we confront the people who turn their backs on her? How do we face Madeline? By uncovering the truth, Agatha replied, her voice steady. We know now that Madeline had a motive. We need to gather evidence that connects her to Isadora's disappearance. This isn't just about justice for Isadora. It's about holding everyone accountable for the pain they caused. Agatha's right, Lila agreed. We need to talk to the townsfolk, dig deeper into what they know, and remind them of Isadora's existence. The more we uncover, the more difficult it will be for them to ignore what happened. As they made their way back to town, the sun rose higher, casting a golden light on the streets that had once been filled with whispers of betrayal and fear. Lila felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer merely three individuals bound by a tragic past. They had transformed into the vanguard of Isadora's truth, ready to confront the shadows that had buried her memory for too long. Their first stop was the town square, where the remnants of the morning market began to take shape. Farmers set up their stalls, and the air buzzed with the sounds of people exchanging greetings and haggling over fresh produce. But beneath the lively facade lay a tension that Lila could feel in her bones, an unspoken fear that seemed to linger like a ghost haunting the edges of their reality. Where do we even start? Jonathan asked, looking around at the bustling crowd. People here have a way of shutting down when it comes to Isadora. We need to find those who remember her most vividly, Agatha suggested. The older residents. They might have seen something or heard something that could lead us closer to the truth. Lila spotted Mrs. Pendleton, an elderly woman known for her vibrant stories of Eldridge's past. There's Mrs. Pendleton. She might know something, Lila said, leading the way toward the woman who sat knitting on a bench, her eyes twinkling with the wisdom of years gone by. Good morning, Mrs. Pendleton, Lila greeted warmly. We were hoping you could share some memories of Isadora with us. Mrs. Pendleton looked up, her brow furrowing in thought. Isadora? Oh, dear child. That name sends shivers down my spine. She was a bright light in this town, and her disappearance left a mark we can never forget. Do you remember anything unusual about the days leading up to her disappearance? Agatha asked, her eyes intent on the older woman. Mrs. Pendleton's gaze drifted to the horizon, as if searching for the ghosts of the past. I remember the storm. It was so fierce that night. But before that, there were rumors, whispers about Madeline. She didn't take kindly to Isadora's beauty or her kind heart. Did you ever see them together? Jonathan pressed. Did you notice any confrontations? Yes, Mrs. Pendleton said, nodding slowly. I once saw them at the town's annual fair. Madeline was seething with jealousy, her eyes blazing. She didn't like how everyone adored Isadora. That night, I could feel the tension in the air. It was like a thunderstorm brewing, just waiting to erupt. Lila's heart raced. Did you hear them argue? Not argue, exactly. But there were sharp words exchanged, she replied, her voice quaking slightly. Isadora was a gentle soul, and she tried to brush it off, but I could see it hurt her. Madeline was relentless. Thank you, Mrs. Pendleton, Lila said, her mind racing with the new information. Your memories mean a lot to us. As they moved through the town, they spoke to others, fellow townsfolk who had their own pieces of Isadora's story to share. Each conversation brought them closer to the truth, weaving a tapestry of recollections that painted a clearer picture of the girl who had been silenced too soon. Lila, do you think Madeline was behind all of this? Jonathan asked as they made their way back to Jonathan's home. What if she really did something terrible to Isadora? I can't say for sure, Lila replied, her heart heavy with uncertainty. But I can't ignore the connections we're finding. Madeline's jealousy, her threats, it all points to something sinister. Once at Jonathan's house, they gathered around the small kitchen table, spreading out the notebook and their collected notes. Lila felt a surge of determination. We need to confront Madeline directly, she said, her voice resolute. If she holds the key to Isadora's fate, we can't let her get away with this any longer. Do you think she'll be honest with us? Agatha asked, a hint of skepticism in her tone. We'll have to prepare ourselves for whatever she might throw our way, Lila replied, a steely glint in her eyes. We have the evidence we need. It's time to hold her accountable. As they made their plans, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows in every corner of the room. Lila's heart raced as they plotted their confrontation, a storm brewing not just outside, but within them as well. The next day, Lila, Agatha, and Jonathan stood outside Madeline's home, a grand house that loomed like a fortress, its windows dark and foreboding. Are we ready for this? Jonathan asked, his hands trembling slightly. Yes, Lila said, her voice unwavering. We owe it to Isadora to confront her and demand the truth. They approached the door, Lila's heart pounding in her chest. As she raised her hand to knock, a gust of wind swept through the yard, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. But she pushed aside her fear and knocked firmly. Moments later, Madeline appeared, her expression unreadable. What do you want? She asked, her tone icy. Madeline, we need to talk, Lila said, her voice steady. It's about Isadora. Madeline's eyes narrowed, her posture stiffening. I have nothing to say about her. She made her choices. Your choices led to her suffering. Jonathan shot back, his voice filled with anger. We know the truth about your jealousy, about the way you treated her. Madeline laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You think you know everything? Isadora was weak. She couldn't handle the pressure of this town. I didn't make her disappear. She chose to run away. Is that what you tell yourself? Agatha asked, stepping forward. You knew she was in danger, and you did nothing. Your jealousy consumed you. Madeline's expression hardened, and for a moment, Lila saw a flicker of fear cross her face. You think you can come here and accuse me? You're nothing but children playing at detective work. You'll never find the answers you seek. We already have, Lila pressed, her voice unwavering. Isadora's journal, the evidence, we have it all. We're not going to let you silence her anymore. Madeline's demeanor shifted, her mask of indifference slipping. You have no idea what you're getting into, she warned, her voice low. You think the past is dead, but it has a way of haunting you. It can come back in ways you can't even imagine. Tell us what you know, Madeline, Jonathan demanded, his fists clenched. You owe it to Isadora. You owe it to yourself. Madeline's gaze flickered toward the ground, her facade cracking. I didn't want it to end like this, she murmured almost to herself. I never meant for it to go this far. What did you do? Lila pressed, her heart racing. I tried to protect her, Madeline said, her voice trembling. But I was consumed by my jealousy. I didn't want to lose Jonathan. I didn't want Isadora to take him away from me. Protect her from what? Jonathan asked, his voice low. You turned the town against her. You isolated her. You made her a target. Madeline's expression turned desperate. I never wanted her to die, but she was so beautiful, so pure. I couldn't stand it. The whispers, the accusations, they became too much for me, too. And then what happened? Lila pressed, pushing for the truth. She confronted me, Madeline admitted, her voice shaking. She said she wouldn't let me hurt her anymore. We fought, and in a moment of anger, I pushed her away. She fell, and I thought she was just playing tricks. I didn't realize. Madeline's voice trailed off, and the room fell silent. The weight of her confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Lila felt a mix of anger and pity for the woman before her. You need to take responsibility for your actions, she said firmly. You can't keep hiding behind your jealousy. Madeline's eyes filled with tears as she looked at them, her walls crumbling. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't mean to hurt her. I was scared of losing everything I had. And now? Agatha asked, her voice softening. What will you do now? Madeline's gaze drifted toward the ground, a sense of resignation washing over her. I'll face the consequences. I owe it to Isadora. The confrontation had changed everything. The truth was out, but it was just the beginning. Lila, Agatha, and Jonathan had uncovered the darkness that had lingered in Eldridge, and now it was time to bring the truth to light. As they stepped away from Madeline's house, the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the ground. Lila felt a sense of closure washing over her, but she knew their journey was far from over. Isadora deserves justice, Lila declared, her heart resolute. We can't let her story end here. Together, they walked toward the horizon, ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to honor the memory of the girl whose light had been extinguished far too soon. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening when Emily returned home from work, her mind still tangled in thoughts of spreadsheets and deadlines. The mundane routine felt comforting as she slipped off her shoes and tossed her bag onto the couch. The aroma of the spaghetti she had prepared earlier still lingered in the air, but her appetite was absent. Instead, she headed straight for the bathroom, yearning for a moment of solitude to wash away the day's stresses. As she stepped into the bathroom, the fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. Emily glanced at her reflection in the mirror, a familiar sight that never failed to comfort her. She was just about to wash her hands when something unusual caught her eye. There, scrawled across the foggy glass of the mirror, were the words, "I see you." Her heart skipped a beat. Confusion washed over her as she took a step closer, the reflection of her startled face staring back at her. Who would write something like that? She could have easily dismissed it as a prank or a result of her own fogged-up mirror. But deep down, an unsettling chill crept along her spine. With trembling fingers, she wiped the mirror with her sleeve, revealing a clear surface, but the message remained etched in her mind. Was it a joke from a friend? A prank by a coworker? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than that. She remembered reading about similar incidents online, urban legends of messages appearing mysteriously, often connected to something sinister. Her imagination began to spiral. The old house she lived in was known for its quirks, from the creaking floors to the unpredictable plumbing. Had something supernatural taken a liking to her? Trying to quell her rising panic, Emily turned away from the mirror, convincing herself that it was just her mind playing tricks. She splashed water on her face, hoping the coolness would help clear her thoughts. After a few moments of deep breathing, she stepped out of the bathroom, determined to distract herself with a book and a warm bowl of pasta. As she settled onto the couch with her meal, the strange message lingered in the back of her mind, refusing to let her relax. The words echoed through her thoughts like a haunting melody. She tried to focus on the pages in front of her, but every rustle of the wind outside seemed amplified, every shadow in her peripheral vision more pronounced. After a few bites, she stood up, her nerves getting the better of her. Maybe I should check the mirror again, she muttered to herself. Maybe it was just a smear of toothpaste or something easily explainable. Returning to the bathroom, Emily stared into the mirror, half expecting the words to have magically reappeared. But the glass was clean, reflecting only her anxious face. Still, the sense of dread gnawed at her, tugging at her gut. She shook her head, frustrated with herself for letting her imagination run wild. "I'm just tired," she reassured herself, switching off the bathroom light and walking back to the living room. The rest of the night dragged on, each sound amplified in her quiet house. She found herself glancing at the clock repeatedly, the minutes stretching into what felt like hours. Finally, exhaustion pulled at her eyelids, and she decided to call it a night. As she climbed into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The words, "I see you," echoed in her mind, merging with the dark corners of her room where shadows danced in the flickering light of her bedside lamp. She buried her head under the covers, desperately trying to convince herself it was just a figment of her imagination. Sleep came reluctantly, wrapped in layers of anxiety. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, and Emily awoke feeling slightly more at ease. The odd message felt like a distant memory, perhaps an overreaction to the stress of her job. She made her way to the bathroom, ready to wash her face and start fresh. As she entered, the familiar scent of her lavender soap filled the air, and she caught a glimpse of her reflection. But as she stepped closer to the sink, her heart dropped once again. This time, the message read, "I'm closer than you think." Fear surged through her, and her heart raced. This was no longer just a strange occurrence. It felt like a threat. "What is happening?" she whispered to herself, panic creeping in. Her mind raced as she considered her options. Should she call someone? Could this be a sick joke from someone who knew her? Perhaps her co-workers had banded together to frighten her. Taking a deep breath, Emily wiped the mirror again, hoping the message would disappear as easily as it had appeared. But the words remained, taunting her. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through her contacts. She needed to talk to someone, to share this inexplicable terror. Her best friend, Sarah, would understand. "Hey Sarah, it's me. Can we talk?" Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. "Of course. What's up?" Sarah replied, her tone cheerful and unaware of the dread enveloping Emily. I had something strange happen last night. I need to tell you about it." As Emily recounted the eerie events, she felt a flicker of fear mixed with relief. Sarah listened intently, her laughter fading as Emily detailed the messages on the mirror. "You're not messing with me, right? That sounds insane," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and concern. "I swear, I'm not lying. This is serious. Okay, let's meet up. We can figure this out together. Just stay calm, all right?" "Yeah, sure," Emily replied, feeling slightly comforted by her friend's support. After hanging up, Emily returned to the bathroom, staring at the mirror once more. She needed answers. Perhaps she could find out if there had been any similar incidents reported in the area. She started a quick search on her phone, her heart pounding as she typed messages appearing on mirrors into the search bar. The results were a mix of urban legends and strange happenings, but one article caught her eye. A report about a woman who had received ominous messages on her mirror before her house burned down in an unexplained fire. The hair on the back of Emily's neck stood up. She had to leave the house, to get out before something terrible happened. As she grabbed her bag and headed for the door, she glanced back at the bathroom one last time. The reflection stared back at her, taunting and ominous, as if it knew she was leaving. Emily's heart raced as she drove to Sarah's apartment, the sun casting long shadows across the pavement. The haunting messages still echoed in her mind, and she felt a mixture of fear and determination. What could possibly be behind these strange occurrences? She needed to find answers. Arriving at Sarah's, Emily quickly parked and rushed inside, her mind swirling with possibilities. Sarah greeted her with a warm hug, sensing the tension radiating from her friend. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost," Sarah said, leading Emily to the living room. Emily took a deep breath and recounted the bizarre events of the previous night. The message on the mirror, the second message that appeared in the morning, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. "Okay, that's definitely creepy," Sarah said, furrowing her brow. "Have you tried looking for any history about your house? Maybe it has something to do with that." "I didn't think of that," Emily replied, feeling a flicker of hope. "I'll search for any news or stories about the house. There has to be some explanation." After settling in with a cup of tea, they turned their attention to the internet. Emily pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she searched for any connection to her home. As the minutes turned into hours, they scoured forums and local news sites, diving into the history of Eldridge, a small town rich with secrets and tales of the supernatural. Finally, they stumbled upon an article from the local newspaper, dated back several decades. It told of a tragic fire that consumed a house in the very neighborhood where Emily lived. The flames had taken the lives of a young girl named Lily and her mother, leaving behind only whispers of their existence. "Look at this," Emily said, pointing to the article. "This happened just a few blocks from my house. What does it say?" Sarah leaned in closer, her eyes scanning the text. The article described how the mother, distraught over the loss of her husband, had become obsessed with the idea that her daughter could still be communicating with her from beyond the grave. It was said that before the fire, she had begun to see messages in mirrors and windows, leaving her friends and neighbors worried for her mental health. "This is insane," Sarah murmured, her voice low. "Do you think this could be related to your messages?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't know, but it's too coincidental. What if the house is haunted? What if Lily is trying to tell me something?" "Okay, we need to be smart about this. Let's not jump to conclusions just yet," Sarah cautioned. "But it might be a good idea to investigate a bit more." The two friends formulated a plan to visit the local library the next day, hoping to dig deeper into the town's history and uncover any other mysterious happenings. As the evening wore on, Emily felt a growing sense of camaraderie with Sarah. They decided to stay up late, watching movies and eating popcorn, trying to distract themselves from the dark thoughts lingering at the edges of their minds. Later that night, As they settled down to sleep, Emily tossed and turned in her bed. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease, and sleep eluded her as her thoughts circled back to the messages. Around midnight, the eerie silence of the house was interrupted by the faintest sound, like a whisper carried on the wind. Emily bolted upright, her heart pounding. "Sarah," she called softly, but no response came. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and crept toward the bathroom, the fear coiling in her stomach. The moment she stepped inside, she was hit with a wave of cold air. Emily flicked the light on, and her breath caught in her throat. There, once again, the message had reappeared on the mirror. "I need you." Panic surged through her as she stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the bathroom mat. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Something was trying to communicate with her, and she felt compelled to listen. Fighting against the rising tide of fear, she picked up her phone and quickly dialed Sarah's number, praying her friend would pick up. "Hello." Sarah's sleepy voice broke through the line, and Emily felt a wave of relief. "Sarah, I'm sorry to wake you, but something's happening again. The message, it's back." Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. "Okay, stay calm. I'm on my way," Sarah replied, her voice suddenly alert. Emily hung up, her hands shaking. She couldn't wait for Sarah to arrive. The feeling that she was being watched intensified, and she needed to understand what was happening. Taking a deep breath, she approached the mirror again, her heart pounding in her chest. The words stared back at her, demanding her attention. "Who are you?" she whispered into the silence. "What do you need from me?" For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her own breathing. But then, as if in response, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Panic clawed at her throat, and she fumbled for the light switch, finally managing to turn it back on. The reflection looked back at her, and in that moment, she felt an overwhelming sadness wash over her. It was as if the air itself had thickened with despair. Then, with a sudden burst of courage, she spoke again. "Is it you, Lily? Are you trying to tell me something?" As if answering her question, the air shifted, and the faintest sound of a child's laughter echoed through the room, sending chills down her spine. It was distant, playful, but tinged with an underlying sorrow. "Please show me," Emily urged, desperation filling her voice. Just then, a knock sounded at her bedroom door. Sarah burst in, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "What happened?" she asked, taking in the scene. "Look at the mirror," Emily exclaimed, pointing. But when Sarah glanced at the mirror, the message had vanished. Only their reflections remained, staring back at them. "Emily, are you okay?" "You look pale," Sarah said, stepping closer. "I'm fine, but I swear the message was there. I heard a laugh too. I think it's Lily." Sarah's brows knitted together as she looked around the bathroom, searching for any sign of what Emily had experienced. "Let's not panic. Maybe we just need to talk to her," Sarah suggested gently. Emily nodded, her mind racing. "You're right. If she's trying to reach out to me, I should at least try to understand." "Let's find out what she wants," Sarah encouraged, her voice steady. They sat cross-legged on the floor, the bathroom light casting a warm glow around them. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the tension seep from her shoulders. "Lily," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "if you can hear me, I want to help you. Please, show me what you need." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly, causing Emily's breath to come out in misty puffs. She opened her eyes, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation. The mirror fogged up once again, and Emily gasped as she watched letters slowly form across the surface. "Find me? What does that mean?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "I don't know," Emily replied, a surge of determination coursing through her. "But we will find out." The two friends shared a look of understanding. They were about to embark on a journey deeper into the unknown, one that could unravel the mysteries of the past and perhaps offer peace to the restless spirit they had unwittingly disturbed. Emily and Sarah sat in the dim light of the bathroom, the chilling message lingering in the air like a specter. The request to find me echoed in Emily's mind, igniting a mix of curiosity and dread. She realized this was no longer just about strange occurrences. It was a call to action, a plea from a soul lost in the shadows. "Where do we even start?" Sarah asked, her voice low as if afraid to disturb the air thick with tension. "I think we should go back to the library," Emily suggested, her determination solidifying. "There has to be more information about Lily and her mother. If they lived in this neighborhood, maybe there's some clue that can help us understand what she wants." As they gathered their things, a surge of adrenaline propelled them forward. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a reminder that time was passing, but Emily felt the weight of urgency. They needed to uncover the truth, not just for their sake, but for Lily's restless spirit. The following morning, they made their way to the local library, a quaint building filled with the scent of old books and the soft rustle of pages turning. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Harrison, greeted them with a knowing smile. She had seen many curious faces come and go, but Emily and Sarah carried an air of determination that intrigued her. "Looking for something specific?" Mrs. Harrison asked, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "Actually, yes," Emily replied, her voice steady. "We're looking for information on a house that burned down a long time ago. It was in the Eldridge area. We think it might be connected to a girl named Lily." Mrs. Harrison's expression shifted to one of surprise. "Ah yes, the fire. It was a tragedy that shook this town. I remember it well. The family that lived there was well liked. Such a sad story. What can you tell us about it?" Sarah pressed, her curiosity piqued. "The mother, Clara, was a devoted woman," Mrs. Harrison began, her voice softening with nostalgia. "After her husband passed away, she struggled. Some say she started to lose her grip on reality, believing she could still communicate with her daughter. The fire claimed both their lives, but it's the stories that linger." Emily felt her heart race as she listened. What kind of stories? People claimed to see Clara wandering the streets, looking for her daughter. Others reported strange occurrences in the neighborhood, like whispers in the night and reflections in mirrors, Mrs. Harrison said, her voice lowering to a whisper. "Do you have any newspaper clippings or records about it?" Emily asked, eager for more information. Mrs. Harrison nodded and led them to a section filled with archives. As they rummaged through dusty files, Emily's fingers trembled over the pages. She felt a connection to the past, as if the stories long buried were rising to the surface. They found an article detailing the aftermath of the fire, how neighbors mourned the loss of the two women and how the house was left abandoned, becoming a ghostly reminder of what once was. Emily's heart sank as she read about the grief-stricken community, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Lily was still present in some form, seeking resolution. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a photo at the bottom of one of the articles. It depicted a little girl with bright blue eyes and a warm smile, standing in front of the house that would soon be consumed by flames. "Lily," Emily whispered, a sense of connection washing over her. "She's real. She lived, and she's still reaching out to me." After hours of digging through records, they compiled a collection of information about Lily and Clara, learning about their lives, their dreams, and ultimately, their tragic end. Emily felt an overwhelming sense of compassion for the little girl whose life had been cut short, and a burning desire to uncover the truth behind her message. As they prepared to leave the library, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from her mother, asking if everything was okay at home. "Everything's fine," Emily replied, though uncertainty gnawed at her. What was really happening in her house? Was Lily trying to warn her of something, or was there another layer to this story? "Ready to head back?" Sarah asked, breaking her train of thought. "Yeah, but we need to come up with a plan," Emily replied, a new resolve in her voice. "I want to see if there's anything left of the house where they lived. Maybe it'll give us more clues." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. "We need to do this," Emily insisted. "If there's a chance to help Lily, I can't ignore it." The drive back was filled with an electric tension, both girls lost in their thoughts. Emily's mind raced with possibilities, her heart pounding as they approached the area where the house once stood. The neighborhood had changed over the years, but a chill still lingered in the air. When they arrived, they found an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and remnants of forgotten memories. The foundation was barely visible, yet Emily could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. "I can't believe it's just gone," Sarah murmured, surveying the area. Emily stepped closer to the edge of the lot, her pulse quickening. I need to be here. I need to connect with her. Be careful, Sarah warned, glancing around as if expecting something to happen. As they walked the perimeter of the lot, Emily felt a pull toward the center. She closed her eyes, imagining what it must have been like before the tragedy. The laughter of children, the warmth of family. A small voice echoed in her mind, urging her to remember. Suddenly, a breeze whipped through the lot, rustling the leaves of the overgrown weeds. Emily opened her eyes, her heart racing. She glanced over at Sarah, who looked equally startled. Did you feel that? Emily whispered. Yeah, Sarah replied, her eyes wide. It felt like something was here. Emily stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Lily, if you're here, please show me. As she spoke, the ground beneath her seemed to tremble slightly, sending a jolt of energy through her body. The air grew thick with tension, and for a brief moment, she felt a presence surrounding her, like a soft embrace. Emily, Sarah's voice broke through the moment, bringing her back to reality. We should probably head back. No, wait, Emily said, her voice steady. I can't leave yet. I need to know more. As if responding to her determination, the air shifted again. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty lot. Suddenly, Emily noticed something glinting in the dirt, half buried and forgotten. She bent down and dug her fingers into the earth, pulling out a small, tarnished locket. It's beautiful, Sarah breathed, stepping closer. Emily carefully opened the locket, revealing two tiny portraits, one of a woman and another of a girl. Her heart skipped a beat. Clara and Lily, she whispered, recognizing them instantly. In that moment, a rush of emotions flooded through her. She held the locket tightly, feeling a connection to the past that was both thrilling and terrifying. This is a piece of their story. This is what she wanted me to find. Emily, this is incredible, Sarah said, her eyes shining with excitement. You have to keep it. It might be a sign. As they stood there, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time since the messages began, she felt as though she was on the right path. This wasn't just about the haunting. It was about honoring the memory of a little girl who had once lived and loved, and perhaps finding closure for her spirit. Let's head back, Emily said, holding the locket close to her heart. I think I know what I need to do next. The atmosphere shifted as Emily and Sarah returned home, the locket securely tucked in Emily's pocket. The weight of the object felt significant, as if it carried the essence of Lily and Clara with it. Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Emily felt empowered by the connection she'd forged with the past. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? Sarah asked, glancing at Emily as they walked through the front door. The house felt different somehow, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I have to, Emily replied, determination lighting her eyes. If there's a chance to communicate with Lily, I can't waste it. As they made their way to the living room, Emily turned on every lamp, flooding the space with warm light. The comforting glow contrasted sharply with the ominous feelings that had shadowed them since the messages started. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. I need to set the mood, she said, pulling out a few candles from a shelf. Let's create a safe space. Sarah nodded, helping Emily arrange the candles around the room. The flickering flames danced, casting long shadows on the walls and adding a layer of intimacy to the air. Once they were satisfied, Emily took a moment to gather her thoughts. Okay, she said, her voice steady. I'm going to try to reach out to her. Do you want me to stay? Sarah asked hesitantly, concern evident in her voice. Please, Emily replied. I need you here with me. Emily settled onto the floor, crossing her legs in a comfortable position. She closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, letting the noise of the world fade away. The echoes of her heartbeat resonated in her ears, grounding her as she sought to connect with Lily's spirit. Lily, she whispered, her voice barely audible. If you can hear me, please come forward. I want to help you. Silence enveloped the room, but Emily remained patient. She felt a tingling sensation in her fingertips, a sign that something was stirring in the air. Sarah sat beside her, holding her breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. Just then, the room grew cold. Emily opened her eyes, a shiver racing down her spine. She looked at Sarah, whose face mirrored her own astonishment. "Did you feel that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yeah," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "It's like she's here." Emily closed her eyes again, focusing on the coldness, trying to decipher the energy surrounding them. "Lily, I want to understand. Please show me what you need." As if answering her call, a soft whisper filled the room, barely audible but unmistakable. "Help me find me." The words hung in the air, sending chills down Emily's spine. "I'm here, Lily," she said, her voice steady. "Tell me what I need to do." The candles flickered violently, the flames twisting and turning as if caught in a gust of wind. Emily opened her eyes, startled, and saw shadows flickering along the walls, dancing in a rhythm that felt both eerie and inviting. "Lily," Emily called out, her heart racing. "Where are you?" Suddenly, the bathroom door creaked open, and Emily felt an irresistible urge to follow. Without hesitation, she stood up, taking a few cautious steps toward the door. Sarah followed closely behind, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for Emily's arm. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah whispered, uncertainty lacing her voice. "I have to," Emily replied, her determination unwavering. "She's leading us somewhere." They entered the bathroom, and as the door swung shut behind them, the atmosphere shifted again. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation. Emily walked toward the mirror, drawn by an invisible force. "Lily," she murmured, placing her hands on the cool glass. "If you're here, give me a sign." As she spoke, the mirror fogged up, and words began to form, scrawled in a delicate hand that seemed to emerge from the mist. "Find my doll," it read, the letters swirling into existence before their eyes. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. "What doll?" she asked, her voice a mix of urgency and confusion. "Where is it?" The fog dissipated, and the mirror cleared, but Emily felt the lingering presence of Lily. "She wants us to find something," Emily said, turning to Sarah. "A doll. But where could it be? Maybe it's still in the house?" Sarah suggested, her eyes darting around the bathroom, searching for clues. "Let's check the attic," Emily decided, a sense of purpose filling her. "If it's anywhere, it might be there." The girls made their way back to the living room, and as they ascended the creaky staircase, the house felt alive, resonating with a mix of excitement and fear. The attic door stood slightly ajar, and as they approached, a soft whisper seemed to beckon them closer. "Be careful," Sarah cautioned, glancing back at Emily. "What if it's something dangerous?" "We can't turn back now," Emily replied, her heart racing with anticipation. "This is Lily's last chance to communicate." They pushed the attic door open, and the sight before them was dimly lit by a single dusty bulb hanging from the ceiling. Boxes were strewn everywhere, remnants of the past collecting dust. The air was stale, and a chill crept up Emily's spine. "Where do we even begin?" Sarah asked, scanning the cluttered space. "Let's start with the boxes," Emily suggested, moving toward a stack piled in the corner. As they rummaged through the old belongings, memories of a family long gone enveloped them. Emily unearthed forgotten toys, clothes, and books, each object carrying a fragment of history. Finally, after what felt like hours of searching, Emily spotted a small, ornate box tucked away in the shadows. It was covered in a layer of dust, but the intricate carvings hinted at its significance. "Look at this," Emily said, lifting the box carefully. It felt almost warm to the touch, as if it held a secret waiting to be unveiled. "Open it," Sarah urged, her excitement palpable. With trembling hands, Emily flipped open the lid, and inside, she found a delicate porcelain doll, its features eerily familiar. The doll's eyes seemed to sparkle in the dim light, and a chill ran down Emily's spine. "This must be Lily's doll," she whispered, recognizing the resemblance. "This is what she wanted us to find." As she lifted the doll from the box, a surge of energy coursed through her, and for a brief moment, she felt Lily's presence surrounding her. "Thank you," a soft voice echoed in her mind, bringing tears to her eyes. "Lily," Emily said, her voice filled with emotion. "You're free now. We found your doll. But as the words left her mouth, the temperature in the attic dropped dramatically. The light flickered, casting shadows that danced ominously on the walls. Emily glanced around, a sense of foreboding creeping in. "What's happening?" Sarah exclaimed, fear evident in her voice. "I don't know," Emily replied, gripping the doll tightly. "But I think she's trying to show us something else." Suddenly, the whispers returned, filling the air with a haunting melody. "Help me finish my story," they urged, echoing through the attic. Emily's heart raced. Finish her story? What does that mean? The atmosphere thickened, and Emily felt the weight of the unfinished business pressing down on her. It was clear they weren't done yet. Not until they uncovered the full truth behind Lily's life and her tragic end. "Stay close," Emily instructed Sarah, determination igniting within her. "We need to find out what she wants us to do next." The whispers subsided, leaving the attic in eerie silence. The cold air seemed to press down on Emily and Sarah as they stood with the doll in hand, its porcelain eyes gleaming in the dim light. The doll felt like a key, an object tied to something unfinished, something that had pulled them deep into this haunting mystery. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "We found the doll. Why does it feel like we're still missing something?" Emily felt the same. The discovery of the doll should have brought closure, yet the atmosphere remained tense, as if they were teetering on the edge of a deeper, more dangerous revelation. "There's more to this," Emily said, her voice filled with resolve. "We're only scratching the surface of what happened to Lily." As they descended from the attic, the house felt unnaturally quiet, the kind of stillness that carried a weight of anticipation. Emily placed the doll carefully on the living room table, and as it sat there, motionless, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching them. "We should look into the history of this place," Emily suggested, pulling out her laptop. "Maybe there's something about the family that lived here before, something that can explain why Lily is still trapped." Sarah nodded, though she couldn't take her eyes off the doll. "I can't stop thinking about what Lily said. Finish my story. It's like she's asking us to uncover something she couldn't tell while she was alive." They spent the next hour digging through old articles, local history blogs, and records from the town's archives. Slowly, a story began to emerge, a story filled with sorrow and mystery. The house had once belonged to the Anderson family, who lived there decades ago. Lily Anderson, the young daughter, had gone missing under suspicious circumstances when she was just 8 years old. Her body had never been found, and while the official story was that she had run away, local rumors hinted at something far more sinister. There were whispers that her parents were involved, Emily said, reading aloud from a blog post. Some people believe Lily was abused or mistreated, and that she may have died inside the house. But it was never proven. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. Do you think her parents were responsible for her death?" "It's possible," Emily replied, her voice tight with unease. "But the fact that her body was never found, it makes me wonder if something even darker happened." The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Lily's spirit was tied to a hidden tragedy, a family secret buried beneath layers of lies. The doll, it seemed, was a symbol of the innocence that had been stolen from her, and now, it was up to Emily and Sarah to piece together the truth. As Emily clicked on another article, her phone buzzed loudly on the table, making both girls jump. It was an unknown number. "Who could that be?" Sarah asked, glancing nervously at the phone. "I don't know," Emily replied, picking it up with hesitation. Her hand trembled slightly as she swiped to answer. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was distorted, a harsh whisper that sent shivers down Emily's spine. "Stop digging," the voice rasped. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Who is this?" The line went dead. "Who was it?" Sarah asked, her voice tense. Emily's hands shook as she set the phone down. I don't know, but whoever it was, they know we're looking into Lily's past." A heavy silence fell over the room as the weight of the situation settled in. The house, the doll, and now this mysterious caller. They were all pieces of a puzzle that felt far more dangerous than Emily had anticipated. "We need to keep going," Emily said, trying to steady her nerves. "We're getting close to something, and that's why someone is trying to scare us off." "Or worse," Sarah added, her voice barely a whisper. As if in response to their conversation, the doll shifted slightly on the table, its eyes catching the light in a way that made it look almost alive. Emily and Sarah stared at it, their hearts racing. Did it just move? Sarah stammered, stepping back from the table. Emily felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. I don't know, but whatever's happening, we need to be careful. Just then, another message appeared, this time on the bathroom mirror. Find the grave. Uncover the truth. The words appeared in the same delicate script as before, fogging up the glass as if written by an unseen hand. Emily and Sarah rushed to the bathroom, their breaths shallow with anticipation. The grave, Emily murmured, piecing it together. Lily's grave, but we already know it was never found. Maybe it's hidden somewhere on the property, Sarah suggested. What if her parents buried her here, in secret? The idea sent chills down Emily's spine. It was a horrifying thought, but one that made a disturbing amount of sense. We need to search the grounds, Emily said, her voice filled with dread. If her grave is here, we have to find it. They grabbed flashlights and made their way into the backyard, the night air cold and heavy around them. The garden, overgrown and wild, seemed to stretch out endlessly in the darkness. With each step, Emily felt the weight of history pressing down on her. She could almost hear the echoes of the past, the silent cries of a girl who had been lost to time. As they searched, their flashlights sweeping across the uneven ground, something caught Emily's eye, a small patch of dirt that looked recently disturbed. Her heart raced as she knelt down to examine it more closely. This could be it, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her pounding heart. Without a word, Sarah joined her, and together, they began to dig, their hands moving quickly through the soft earth. Time seemed to blur as they worked, the night closing in around them. And then, with a sickening thud, Emily's hand hit something solid. Her breath caught in her throat as she brushed away the dirt, revealing the edge of a wooden box. It was old, rotted, and crumbling, but unmistakably a makeshift coffin. We found her, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. We found Lily. But as they stared at the box, a sense of overwhelming dread washed over them. The truth was finally in their hands, but it was more terrifying than they had ever imagined. Her story isn't over yet, Emily said, her voice trembling. There's still something we're missing. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents.